we're going to go ahead and call to order the City of Wilmington's Board of Adjustment meeting for Thursday, May 18th. It is 1:01. And moving forward with the agenda, do you want to change any items on the agenda now or wait? Was there going to be any adjustment to the agenda?
I believe that there's been a request to consider moving 136 Skies to Sell Drive further down the agenda because we have a board member that needs to recuse themselves from this item, and we will have a substitute member for them at 3:30. Additionally, item 1, 1601 South College Road, they've requested to continue that item to July, so the board would need to vote on both of those items.
Having a little trouble hearing you, I apologize.
My mic says that it's on. Now I believe it's just been adjusted. We'll just go in order. 1601 South College Road, the applicant has requested to continue that item until July.
All right, well, we can take those in order and then we'll go. So for item number 1, it involves 1601 South College Road. There's been a request for continuance on that item?
Yes, sir. That's to allow the applicant time to work with city's legal staff to potentially settle this matter outside of the board.
All right, and
so they are requesting to continue to the July meeting.
I'm sorry, I'm still having trouble hearing you. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
July 20th.
Okay, I'd propose a motion that we continue item 1, 1601 South College Road to the July 20th Board of Adjustment meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. Move on to item number 2, and we've talked about.
One of the board members has requested to recuse themselves from this item. We currently have 5 members sitting, so to allow the applicant a full complement of the board for this item, we would need to wait until an alternate arrives at 3:30 to fill in.
All right, and is the applicant present, and see if that is acceptable to them?
I do not see the applicant, but I know that there are several members of the public who are here with interest in that item.
All right, we'll go ahead and move item number 2 to the, be number 9 or below number 9. And then, so we'll move on to, do you need a motion to change the agenda for this purpose?
I do not believe a motion is necessary. No.
Okay.
I believe that the board can make that change. Yeah. I mean, the board chair.
Okay, and while we're looking at some of the, number 7 is going to be withdrawn. We can go ahead and vote on the withdrawal, approval of that withdrawal on that item. So number 7 involves 3305 Princess Place Drive. The applicant has requested withdraw that.
I'd make a motion that we can withdraw item 3305 Princess Place Drive as requested by the applicant.
All right, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. Before we continue on and to hear other cases, excuse me, I'm going to ask Patrick if you'll read the Board of Adjustment introduction for me, please, while I get my voice.
Hearings before the Board of Adjustment are quasi-judicial in nature. Decisions of the board are based on the record of these proceedings. To grant a variance requires a concurrent vote of 4/5 of the members of the board. To reverse or modify the determination of an administrative official requires a simple majority. Evidence submitted to the board for review becomes part of the record. Appeals of board decisions are to Superior Court and are based on the record. Appeals must be filed within 30 days of the date of the filing of the board's order in the Planning Division. A hearing before the board is conducted in accordance with its rules of procedure. Those who want to testify in a case are sworn as witnesses. The chairperson recognizes those who want to testify or their attorneys for presentation of evidence during the hearing. To ensure that all testimony is properly recorded, please come forward to address the board, state your name, address, and speak clearly.
right, thank you. We're going to go back to the approval of the minutes from the April 20th, 2023 meeting. I'll just give a second for the technical situation.
I'm using my hotspot. Yeah, the city of Wilmington. The city of Wilmington is now. Yeah, the city of Wilmington.
All right, well,
I'm using my. I got my hotspot. I'll be all right.
all right, appreciate your patience. We are going to go and address the approval of the minutes from the April 20th, 2023 meeting. If there isn't a change, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
I'll motion.
In a second, please.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The minutes have passed. Now we're going to move to item number 3. Item number 3 involves subject property 2346 Carolina Beach Road. It's involving a variance to the tree preservation regarding specimen trees and mitigation requirements for the proposed multi-dwelling project in the MD-17 district pursuant to City Code, Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-316. I will recognize the city for the presentation.
And just in advance of that presentation, if we could swear in anyone who would like to speak on this item.
All right.
I'm going to ask staff, applicants, and members of the public wishing to speak today to stand and raise their right hand, even if you think you might speak. All right, do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And if anyone that has not signed in could sign in, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. For item number 3 for Carolina Beach.
Good afternoon. Here we are, item number 3, 2346 Carolina Beach Road. The subject property is zoned MD-17 and is currently vacant with a vacant commercial warehouse. The applicant has proposed to redevelop the subject site for workforce housing, for which they have obtained funding from the City of Wilmington and New Hanover County to offset project costs and to incentivize the construction of 278 affordable housing units. The subject property contains a 32.5-inch live oak, which is considered a specimen tree pursuant to LDC Section 18-316B. Land Development Code Section 18-316B2 states that removal of specimen trees shall be authorized by a waiver from the Board of Adjustment. The applicant states that the site's topography requires stormwater management infrastructure, necessitates the removal of the subject tree, and that the lower lying area proposed for the stormwater pond is not conducive to supporting the health of the tree long-term. Section 18-316F of the Land Development Code, removed protected trees shall be mitigated on-site using the same or comparable species. Mitigation for significant and specimen trees shall occur at a rate of 200%. For every 1 caliper inch of tree removed, measured in diameter at breast height, 2 caliper inches of mitigation trees shall be planted. The arborist report has been verified by city staff, found that there are 8 significant and 1 specimen tree found on the site. The total mitigation required for the site would be a combined 424 caliper inches. Mitigation of a 32.5-inch live oak tree requires planting 65 caliper inches of comparable tree species on the site. The The total mitigation fees as payment in lieu would cost $74,200 for the entire site. On February 2nd, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for variance to tree preservation regarding one specimen tree and mitigation requirements in the high-density multiple dwelling residential MD17 district pursuant to Code 18, Chapter 18, Section 18-316, to allow the removal of the 32.5-inch live oak tree and to waive all required mitigation for specimen and significant trees proposed to remove on the site. On April 25th, 2023, staff forwarded an email to the applicant's representative to include a proposal to alter the stormwater pond to potentially save the live oak. On May 2nd, 2023, the applicant responded that the tree's root zone essentially splits the stormwater pond area and that the variance was still necessary. Staff has proposed an amendment to the city fee schedule for city-supported affordable housing projects. However, such change would not go into effect until July 1st, 2023, if the City Council votes to approve the proposal. This matter is set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment on April 20th, 2023, and it's subsequently continued to May 18th, 2023, meeting due to not having a complement of the board. The case is subject to the 4 findings of fact, and I would like to submit all materials in this presentation into the record. Staff is available for questions, and the applicant is present as well.
I have one question. When is the city council meeting where they're going to vote on the amended fee schedule for city-supported affordable housing projects?
That item actually went to City Council on Tuesday, and I'm not entirely sure when the final reading is, but it goes forward at the same time that the annual budget goes forward.
So that will be sometime in June. I think the last meeting of June that council will finalize that vote. But it's my understanding there were no questions or concerns about that particular change.
Thank
So
you.
it has been to council once already for its first reading.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? All right, we'll move on to see the applicant is present and would like to speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Bostic. I'm with Kimley Horn, representing the owner, 421 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. We have a short presentation to provide today to further elaborate on the responses to the findings of fact. So as Chris is getting that ready, so first, again, I'm Chris Bostic. Also here with me today is Ted Hilbrun with Kelly Development, and Emma Radford, who is our certified arborist. Thank you for the time today. First off, just to reiterate what Chris has mentioned, we have 2 requests in front of you. One, we're requesting the removal of 1 specimen tree on the property, and then the waiver of mitigation payment for the removal of significant trees. The first part of our presentation is focusing on the 1 specimen tree, and Ms. Radford here is going to provide some additional commentary on the specifics of the tree. But first, a couple of unique factors associated with the property. On the screen, you'll see the tree in question is clouded on the left, and it is inboard to the allowable developable area of the property. Immediately to the right on the plan, shown in purple, is the lowest portion of the property. As we mentioned in our application, that's where stormwater is typically required and where stormwater has to be based on the topography of the site. As you look at the image on the right of the screen, you'll note that the tree is located immediately adjacent to a paved drive aisle associated with the previous development of the property. That drive aisle is then associated with the former use of the property as a drive-in and then also as a flea market. There's approximately 13 feet of elevation change across the property. If you look again to the slide on the left, there's a high point elevation in the southwest corner noted as elevation 32, and then in the northeast corner, elevation of 21. So that represents the difference in elevation of how we need to have water flow from a high point to low point and have stormwater treatment in the low part of the property. A couple more thoughts. Additional requirement of the project is the extension of Maryland Avenue. So Maryland Avenue currently terminates on the southwestern portion of the property and is going to be extended across the entirety of the southern portion of the property to Carolina Beach Road. So that further reduces the area for the proposed workforce housing project. We are saving trees. The trees that you see on the western property boundary in the left exhibit, those trees are going to remain. Those will serve as a buffer to the adjacent residential properties. So we do feel that those are providing value. But the tree that's clouded here does provide a hardship for what we're looking to do here. The property has been previously identified and approved by the state for the construction of 278 units of workforce housing. As it is workforce housing, the intent is to construct the project within a budget that supports the rents of workforce housing. And where we are proposing our stormwater pond, if we can flip to the next slide, Chris. Yep. In the northern part of the site, and the next slide too, Chris, thank you. Zooming in further, where that pond is shown, that's the most effective way environmentally to meet city stormwater regulations and cost-wise also to meet city standards. As mentioned previously, the pond does need to be located on the low portion of the property, and the ground elevation of where the pond is proposed is significantly lower than where the tree is located today, which would necessitate its removal. Now I'm going to have Ms. Radford talk briefly on the tree itself.
Hi, everyone. If you can scroll down to the next slide, please.
Just for the record, state your name and address.
My name is Emma Radford with Kimley Horn. I was able to go on site on February 14th of this year to assess the site for different specimen and significant trees. Tree number 3 was found to be a live oak. These are just general characteristics that we have here. As Chris mentioned, the tree root zone is located right next to some impervious surface from the existing development. Overall, the general condition of the tree was found to be fair. The critical root zone, as defined by the City of Wilmington, is 1.25 times the caliper inch of the tree. So multiply that by 32.5-inch tree, you're looking at about a 40-foot radius of the tree that is considered the critical root zone. Removing the impervious surface adjacent to that tree definitely could damage the root zone. It could actually even go further than that, since we can't see underground exactly how far the root zone goes, but within 40 feet is a general guideline of a critical root zone, hopefully not to disturb, because disturbance could reduce the overall condition of the tree. General characteristics, we had about 5% dieback, which is defined as it is decreasing in foliage from the root tip inwards. So that usually means there is a water retention problem. 5%, obviously, it's not too much, but that was just general view of the tree. We also had some thin roots that are girdling the tree. Girdling, while this one is very small and it's likely not limiting the tree at this time, as the root zone grows, it could reduce the overall intake of water for the tree and just photosynthesis in general. If you can scroll down to the next slide, please. And then these are more just overall structure images of the tree. We do have a codominant structure. A lot of times that means there are two large stems coming from one focal point within the tree, and it does have included bark in between that. Included bark is very typical of codominant trees and likely increases the weakness of the structure of the tree. Like we said, overall it was a fair condition, but different site improvements that are proposed could eventually make it worse. So yeah.
So as Mr. Radford notes, the tree is considered to be in fair condition. It's close to the road, to a road that will be removed during the construction of the project. While the main hardship here is associated with the overall topography and the drainage patterns and the extension of Maryland Avenue, we do think that this plays into consideration for this first request. Regarding the second request, which is the waiver of the mitigation payment, I think we previously noted on the application, but the project had been delayed previously due to funding, and the ordinance has since changed, and so the mitigation requirement is something that that's been added to the project budget, or it would be in addition to the project budget if it was have to be paid. So we're seeking relief from the tree mitigation, as the current budget that was approved by the project does not include an allocation for those payments. Payment of that mitigation imposes additional hardship on the entities that funded the project, including the city. We do feel that waiver of the fees would provide for substantial justice in this specific situation. So to quickly summarize through these again, unnecessary hardship would result from strict application of the regulations. We are building within the envelope of the property as by city regulations. The stormwater pond needs to be located in that northeastern corner. It's causing a hardship. That's also a condition that's peculiar to the site, is the topography. The road extension along the southern portion of the site is a condition that's peculiar to the property. We haven't done anything as the applicant to cause the problem. The tree was there when the property was identified. And then lastly, we do think that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved as we're providing for a workforce housing project. And here to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, is there any questions for the applicant?
Can you explain again why the retention pond has to go in that location?
Sure. Can we flip back a couple of slides, Chris? Thank you. Yeah, so from a stormwater management standpoint, the stormwater facility has to be on the lowest portion of the property. And so there's about 12 feet of elevation change from the highest point to the lowest point. And so this is the lowest point of the property. When the water leaves the pond, it needs to go to a location that can receive that water. And so the absolute lowest point of the property is that northeast corner on this slide where it says tree location. So that's what's necessitating that location.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to the evidentiary hearing portion of the hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak in relation to that can present information that's relevant to this matter present today? All right. Being none, we'll close and move on to if there's any. 1 second, please.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, this is an open meeting. If you could have any.
Yeah. Okay. Well, not being any for the evidentiary hearing, we're going to move forward. Is there any further from the city on this?
Sir.
Okay. Anything from the applicant? All right. We'll go in, we'll close the hearing, and we'll move on to deliberations and see what the wishes of the board.
I think we got two things. Well, we do have two things before us. One is the removal of a specimen tree, and I think that the applicant may have presented a fairly good case for that. The second item is we don't want to pay the mitigation, and I'm not, nobody wants to, and so I'm not sure that that is a hardship. And there may be a resolution once City Council meets and makes their determination that would go into effect July 1st, but I'm not sure that nobody wants to pay a mitigation fee, so I'm not sure that's a hardship.
Can the city tell us what the amended, the fee schedule would be? Does it wipe it out, or is it
Yes,
percentage?
the amended fee schedule would exempt projects that are for affordable housing and receiving city funding for such affordable housing from having to pay mitigation. I believe that in this instance, there isn't maybe so much a case of it being a hardship as much so as an unnecessary hardship because as Mr. Moore has pointed out, the city is seeking to find some long-term resolution for other projects moving forward. However, it's staff's understanding that there are some issues with the time frame with which this would be adopted by city council that would impact funding for their project. They may be able to speak to that more specifically.
Okay. So they would not
a
fall.
waiver of the fee not just be, kind of a variance of convenience because nobody wants to wait until July 1st? I mean, we have a solution on the board with city council. And to me, just saying, hey, we don't want to pay the mitigation cost, I mean, nobody does.
And I don't believe that it's as simple as no one wants to pay the cost. The changes to the fee schedule will only apply to affordable or workforce housing projects that also receive funding from the city. And the reason that these folks cannot wait is because of the timeline they are on. They're receiving federal and state funding as well as city funding.
I understand, but right now, at present, the fees have not been waived for affordable housing projects. Isn't that correct?
They have not technically been waived. They've been heard once by city council and are pending their second reading.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts from different board members?
I'm just trying to interpret this I'm not can the city confirm the topography levels? Like, we're taking their word for it that there's an elevation change, but when I look at this topography map, like, they're claiming a 13-foot difference between northwest to southeast, but I'm seeing the number 25 up around I see 27 feet listed on the topography map near that tree, and then 27 down in the left-hand corner again. So I'm just verifying, like, it is accurate. They're just making a statement. They're showing us one plan. This is like the only plan that is out there that they either build it this way or they don't.
The city has not independently gone out to survey the topography on that site. However, we do have our own geographic information system that has topographic layers in it, and the applicant's representation of the topography is not inconsistent with that.
Okay, thank you.
And moving forward on this, anyone have a directive or more conversation? I do feel that the situation that relates to the type of housing and some of the changes that have been in our land use code, but that relates to affordable and workforce housing, does give some leeway in this situation. It is hard because we're going to have other cases that revolve around trees, and that is a pretty passionate topic in our community. This is actually a project that is providing us a lot of housing we do not have. So it's something that I think that tying into the purpose of what we do is something for us to consider in our deliberation.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the board this is the biggest tree ever to come in front of me as a board member, and never had a huge live oak like this ever come in front of me. It's a significant tree. We're not allowed to say anything along the lines of other trees replacing this, like they take down a tree that's not in this board's realm of what they have to replace a tree with?
Yeah, I don't believe that it would be appropriate for the board to get into that process. They are going through site development with the planning department and have certain things that they have to do to come into compliance with general planning. And I think Ms. Thurston can speak better to that.
They are going to need approval from the city's technical review committee. However, the applicant is requesting a variance from the mitigation requirements for this tree and all of the other trees that are being removed because of conflicts with essential site improvements.
Has the city's tree commission, do they play any role in taking a look at this?
I am not aware that they have reviewed this project.
Okay.
And they're an advisory board, so they advise more of city council on policies, not on specific properties and trees issues.
Thank you.
Any further items, discussions, thoughts on this matter?
I kind of agree with Scott. This is our biggest tree that's come before us. I'm almost more willing to waive the fee because knowing that that's going to be initially waived or potentially for future projects waived anyway. Just wish there was a way to
I
to
can't hear
save
you,
this.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you can't hear me? Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Don't know what to tell you, Patrick.
Yeah, what's
I
going,
will, if
the
I may,
AV issues,
just interject. We are having some audiovisual issues. We have staff here trying to correct that. So if at any point
Should
you
we
can't,
take a minute to let them work on that, or is it, because,
we could give them a moment. We could speak louder and hope that the echo doesn't drive everyone crazy while they are trying to figure out.
Jess, just yell.
All right.
yes.
I agree with Scott. This is one of the larger trees that we've had come before us on the board, and I'm more willing to waive the fee associated with cutting down trees more than I am to move or to have this one tree cut down. It just seems like there's always an option after or to do something different with the property. And I know that I'm not trying to go back to the drawing board, but that's a pretty significant tree for our community. And I'm not passionate one way, 100% passionate one way or the other, but I do feel like there could possibly be another way because we've seen that time and time again.
All right. Okay. And moving on forward, is there anyone that has more to add, or is there anyone that would like to make a motion in some way?
I have some I know that there's affordable housing, and I know we've got one tree standing in the way, and I know that the mitigation doesn't want to be paid, and you know, it's very difficult. I mean, I kind of agree with what Jess is saying. You know, is there a way to work around that tree? I mean, you know, say, hey, what if we do this? And they say, nope, can't do that. We got to just leave it like it is. Is that adequate? An adequate exploring of, is there an option to save that tree? Because it is a significant tree.
Yeah, and like I said, I agree with the significance of the tree. Like I said, I brought up just the scenario where we're at, so I totally appreciate that. Is there, in looking at ways to work through something like this, anyone have any thoughts of trying to expand on this? I guess we're at a point where if someone wants to make a motion in some directive, we can entertain that.
I'm trying to find.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I don't want to go back and questioning them again, but it's just like this is the only layout that they're wanting. I don't know if we should ask them that, like, I mean, they said that that corner is the lowest corner. If I look at the topography map, I don't see why they can't reorient the pond in a more north to south direction. I know that affects that building number 2 on the map. I guess I don't understand why they can't reorient the pond.
We could reopen the public hearing and
Yeah,
ask
that would
those
be good
questions.
to understand that.
If we have a motion to reopen the public hearing, we can do that.
I make a motion that we reopen the public hearing.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're going to go back into the evidentiary hearing, and we'll ask that the applicant please come up.
So you've obviously presented one layout. The problem is buildings 2 and 3, you want to put the pool where the tree is. Have any other layout options? Did you please tell me you tried something else?
Yes, we did, and thank you for the consideration. So, and in fact, your staff actually asked us the same question. I think that was referenced in the record of the correspondence. So, a couple of factors playing in here. Certainly, you have pretty substantial stormwater requirements with the city. So the pond in itself has to be significantly sized. So the footprint that you see on the plan right now is what I would call the minimum size the pond could be to meet city ordinance. And unfortunately, the tree sits right in the middle of the pond. Now, with respect to your questions as far as reorienting the pond, we have looked at that. And the difficulties arise because this is a workforce housing project. We have other agencies that we have to meet their requirements. So there are very specific requirements about how close parking spaces have to be to buildings, how many entrances we have to buildings, and also the number of parking spaces. So the state requires more parking spaces than what city ordinance requires here. That's a state regulation to have a project approved as a workforce housing project. So all those factors combined, there's an efficiency with the layout that we have to make that work. We looked at bifurcating the pond into 2 separate areas around the tree on both the east and the west side. And unfortunately, what that does is it makes the pond has to be bigger. So then we push into that L-shaped building on the left side. So long story short, we're out of space from a unit standpoint. We can't go higher because if you add a floor to the buildings, then you're adding cost to it because you're going from a building that has steps to a building that has elevators. So I know it's a very kind of nuanced argument, but with the type of project that it is, it makes it very difficult because I don't disagree that you could move and shift things around to avoid the tree, but to accomplish what is required from a workforce housing regulation standpoint, we feel very strongly that that tree is definitely causing us a very significant hardship.
So how many units do you think you would lose in that?
Sure.
So I'm Ted Heilbronn, Kelly Development Company. Address is 912 Village Crossing Drive. Because of the nature of the financing this project has, it's got $3.5 million of money committed from the city, almost $2 million from the county, and then another $9 million from a state agency called NCOR, who administers the hurricane relief funds that the state's received over the years. It is not possible to change our unit count without having to substantially amend the funding agreements that this project has secured as necessary to move forward. So the answer could be 2 units, it could be 15 units. The reality is it causes significant issues for the project if we start moving unit counts around, up or down.
You said how many parking spots per apartment is required by the state?
We end up needing to park to 2 per. Workforce housing developments end up concentrating with slightly larger bedroom sizes, so a market rate apartment deal is mostly 1s and 2s. Workforce deals are more oriented towards families, and so it's a very small percentage of 1s, then mostly 2 and 3 bedroom units, which require a more substantial parking solution.
Ms. Thurston, we don't have any way to override number of parking spots as a city compared to what the state supposedly requires for workforce housing?
No, sir, the state would take precedent.
The requirements are set by NCHFA, who, without them, we wouldn't be getting tax credits and bonds to build a deal, so we're not looking to move outside of what NCHFA would like to see.
So much parking. There's so many parking spots. It's just unreal.
Could we adjust or could they request a variance on pond size?
No, sir, the state stormwater permits or requirements would also prevail over city code requirements.
I mean, so and is it North Carolina Finance that regulates some of your tax? Is that
North Carolina Housing Finance Agency administers the state's low-income housing tax credit program. So when we say workforce housing, this development is committing to 30 years of capping rents and the incomes of potential tenants at effectively what half of market rate rents are. And so that creates these financing challenges that requires public capital, in this case city, county, state, on top of the tax credits to help build this stuff, because we're unfortunately subject to the same cost of construction, cost of capital that the market rate development community is, but we're capping our rents at half of what they have access to.
So, but it is a 30-year tie to your.
There's a land use restriction, so there's no wiggle room. That's the nature of our business.
Sort of something above and beyond the normal market rent or market request. Okay.
Is the whole complex affordable housing?
Yes, sir.
Anybody have any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Since we're still in the, we reopen the public, is there any questions for the city? Or comments?
I would just like to say that the board here has the option, of course, to approve or deny the request for a variance. They could modify the request, or they could place conditions on it. If the board would like to consider the condition that the applicant meet with city stormwater staff to pursue other options that would spare the tree in this instance and get some sort of verification from our city engineering department that the tree can't reasonably be saved without impacting the unit count or the parking, we could make that a condition in this case.
I mean, because we have a brand-new road going in, like, increase the size of the sewer line of the brand-new road, something along that. There's got to be something, the runoff could go towards the new street, something like that.
So, sorry about that. So there is Catherine, just so we could consider some modifications regarding the stormwater, and so the variance would look, trying to figure out how that would actually look, and actually it has to be something that the applicant could live with. But
Well, I think we would be saying, the variance is okay, waiving the fees is okay, but they've got to go talk to the city.
Yes, sir. You would be making a motion to grant the variance with the condition that the applicant work with the city to pursue options that would potentially redesign that stormwater pond such that the tree could be saved, but that if that impacts the unit count or the parking that's required by the state, that, we wouldn't consider that a viable solution.
I'm good with that.
okay, all right. I did see the applicant. Do you have anything else y'all want to mention or say?
We're obviously happy to coordinate with staff. Our largest challenge, aside from cost, is timing. We're moving quickly towards a ground break in August, and so if the variance requires us to coordinate with staff, and we'll happily walk across the street and have those conversations. That's not a concern. If the requirement is to come back or, add substantially more time to the conversation, that's not something we're going to be able to contemplate.
And I guess one of the things, we did talk a little bit about the number of parking spaces, a requirement by the state, but actually workforce housing, most of those households, we have such a poor public transportation system that sometimes the direction of states on those parking number of spaces for affordable and workforce. So you're not going to be able to get away, that came up as a concern, but it is something I think we see because of the people that live in those complexes. So, I mean, you tie that, your studies for your needed spaces sort of relate to that.
Yeah, we would love to not have to build as many parking spaces. Trust me, it's a cost. But if we don't properly park the complex, then we'll have folks parking in the neighborhood, and I'm sure we've talked to plenty of neighbors who wouldn't like to see that happen. So it's an it's an unfortunate requirement that the project will be subject to.
I'm prepared to make a motion if you are.
Oh, well, I'll go ahead and I'll see if there's anything else left in the public hearing. Any other questions for the applicant or the city?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing and move back to deliberations. And there was a talk of a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion based on the 4 findings of fact. There is hardship based on the property, the topography of the property, the requirements by the state, and the limitations that are put on a developer that are trying to do workforce housing. So therefore, there is unnecessary hardship. The hardships result from conditions that are peculiar due to the topography. The applicant did not take actions that caused this, and it is within the spirit and purpose of the ordinance. So I'll make a motion to grant the variance, waive the fees, with the conditions that they work with city staff to hopefully not have to build a pond.
Or save the tree.
Reorient the pond to save
Reorient the
tree.
pond or work with the city to potentially mitigate loss of the tree.
To potentially reconfigure the stormwater pond
There we go.
to spare the tree.
Thank you.
All right. There's been a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right. There's been, with that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. We will move on to item number 4. Item number 4 involves 307 North Front Street. Request for a variance to the wall signage requirements in the RB Commercial District pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Development Code, Section 18-389, subsection A, subsection 5, and small a. We'll move forward and with the city presentation.
Hello again.
Thank you.
307 North Front Street is Zone CBD. The subject parcel is part of a multi-tenant commercial development, the Cotton Exchange, constructed circa 1929 according to New Hanover County tax records. On or about December 8, 2022, the applicant submitted an application to zoning approval for zoning approval for a 2.5 by 20-foot sign located above the ground floor of the building. Land Development Code Section 18-389B1 allows one projecting sign per ground floor unit, provided no wall sign, if also permitted, is located on the same facade within 20 feet of the projecting sign. Projecting signs extend out from the corner of the building are not subject to the separation requirement. On or about December 8, 2022, Associate Planner Miranda Garman denied the projecting sign due to the sign exceeding the area allowed and the sign being located above, that should be above the ground floor unit as set forth in Section 18-389B2. Additionally, Section 18-389B2 projecting signs shall be subject to the standards in the Table 18-389-2 projecting sign standards. The total sign square footage of the proposed sign exceeds the allowed square footage of 15 square feet by 35 square feet and is located above the ground floor unit. The applicant has submitted a front elevation of the building and the area for the proposed sign would cover. On February 6, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to the wall sign requirements in the Central Business District pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-389B2. The applicant has requested a variance of 35 square feet to the Land Development Code, Section 389, to install a 50-square-foot projecting sign and to allow the subject sign to be located above the ground floor unit. The applicant states that the Cotton Exchange occupies an entire city block and contains approximately 60 separate businesses. The applicant further states that the Cotton Exchange would not be promoting one business or service, but rather the building as a whole. This matter is set forth before the Board of Adjustment on April 20th and is subsequently continued to the May 18th, 2023 meeting due to not having a full complement of the board. The case is subject to the 4 findings of fact, and I submit this and all materials and presentation into the record. Staff is available for questions, and the applicant is present as well.
All right, does anyone have any questions of staff right now? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the applicant's presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Bullock Hartso, and I am the property manager of the Cotton Exchange, and I am the daughter of the current owner, Gene Bullock. The Cotton Exchange has been a place of commerce and services since the mid-1800s and continues that rich tradition today. Through the years, great care has been given to this piece of property, from original owners to the stewards that have it today. They preserved the history and the architectural integrity of the 8 buildings that make up this beautiful piece of property. It occupies the west side of North Front Street and is flanked by Walnut, Grace, and Water Streets, occupying an entire city block. Yet, and still, many people have a hard time finding us. So I am here today representing the owner as well as 60 tenants who feel this on a regular basis. With the recent completion of the Front Street project, which by the way looks great, we have looked to make our own improvements along Front Street, having recently completed a facade renovation project with much help from WDI. This, along with Front Street project, has the Cotton Exchange looking the best that it has in years, and we are poised with a lot of the growth downtown to realize increased growth and traffic and revenue for our tenants. It's amazing the number of calls that my office gets on a weekly basis with people that cannot find us. Many people being in the 200 block of North Front Street looking north and south and cannot seem to find us as there is no definitive landmark that is there. They are looking up and down the street, and the calls are from tourists, they're from history buffs, they're from shoppers, they're from diners, they're from clients, from our mental health services, from the lawyers. We have a very nice sign over the front of the building between the historic lanterns that identifies who we are, but looking from Market Street south or from the college north, you would have no idea what this full block composes. I'm requesting a variance for this sign. By nature, it's a directional sign. It's a frame of reference. It does not advertise what we are, what we do. It advertises that this is the Cotton Exchange. It's a city block. It has historical significance, and it could just be a landmark. Daniel Pena with J.C. Print and I worked together to develop a long, narrow sign, thinking that it will be mesh, maybe not as saturated as this picture would imply. It would withstand high winds. It would be anchored to the side of the building. The mesh would be a little less opaque than a wooden sign. We worked together to create a very simple lettering, hopefully not obtrusive, just to let people know that they have arrived at the Cotton Exchange or can see us from a block or two away. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
I do not.
All right, thank you. All right,
Any questions?
appreciate it, thank you. All right, anything additional with the city on that?
No, sir, nothing from staff.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the evidentiary hearing and open up to non-parties that have any information they'd like to share with the public that's competent, material, substance, and evidence, and relevant to this matter. Is there anyone in the public that'd like to speak? You can come up to the podium and give us your name and address.
And ma'am, were you sworn in earlier? Did you?
Oh, okay, well,
You'll
yeah,
turn
we'll
to our,
go ahead and swear you in.
You'll raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Christina Haley. I live at 124 Walnut Street. I'm Vice President of Wilmington Downtown Incorporated. Since last year, Wilmington Downtown Incorporated has been working with Cheryl and the Cotton Exchange on a grant award through our Facade Improvement Grant Program. The Cotton Exchange has spent a tremendous amount of resources and investment in improving the Front Street facing facade of the property and overall contributing to the beautification efforts of our city. Last week, I met with Cheryl to go over a completed facade project, and I am starting the process of working with the city on their seal of approval to award this grant. WDI has allocated $5,000 to the Cotton Exchange for this facade improvement grant. This proposal adds to the work the Cotton Exchange is doing and aims to increase consumer traffic into this building and improving business and thus downtown commerce overall, as well as the activity for its many retailers. A sign to this corner would be a benefit to the business in wayfinding. I have literally seen visitors standing at the corner of Grace and Front Street looking at their phones, trying to find where the Cotton Exchange is. They're visitors, they're unfamiliar with the city, and who could have guessed that an entire block, a building that spans an entire block would have so many businesses within it and would be the Cotton Exchange if you're new to the city. So our ambassadors have done many wayfinding exercises with folks downtown as well, trying to help visitors and tourists locate the Cotton Exchange. Given this property only has one street-facing sign in the middle of the block, I would support this measure, whether it be through its current design or working with the Cotton Exchange in a design that meets the needs of both the property owner and the city. The sign is sleek, it's beautiful, and it would serve a very important and significant purpose. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? All right, seeing that there are no further interest in speaking, we'll go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing. We can talk to, see if there's any rebuttal or further from either party. All right. We'll go ahead and talk about deliberations.
We talk about signs a lot, it seems like. But, you know, in this instance, I think the four findings of fact are certainly met. I mean, unnecessary hardship exists now because people have a hard time finding the property. It does result from conditions that are peculiar to the property given its size and historic nature. And the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant. And I think it does certainly fit in with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, and especially helping to drive people to downtown Wilmington and to a landmark of Wilmington. So I would be in support of this variance request.
I agree with Patrick. I would be in support of this as well.
It's not a lit sign, correct? Did anybody catch that? I guess I should have asked before she walked away. I'm looking through the paperwork.
It was mesh. Yeah, she said it's going to be mesh.
Sign, yeah.
I do think that it would serve a great purpose, being right there in front of, I mean, I'm going to say, I've been lost looking for the Cotton Exchange there before. However, I think it could be scaled. I mean, just doing some simple math, a 2-foot by 18-foot sign would serve the same purpose and be within 1 square foot of, the ordinance that we have in place. I would suggest altering the scale of it to fall within the sign ordinance that we already have in place.
Yeah, and just, so the applicant hears our rationale and thought where we go with this is like the moment one sign ordinance or one variance is granted for signs, there's a precedent set, so we have to be vigilant.
And I generally, like with the sign ordinance, that we should stay very firm and to it, but I think in this situation, this is a structure that qualifies as a historic, and we do sometimes add extra attention to our historic locations downtown. So because in setting a precedent, I mean, when I first read this, my first thought was, no, we stick to this, but because of the historical elements, I think that's where they set out a little.
And it's also not promoting any individual businesses, promoting the building itself, the Cotton Exchange.
It's such a big property, it's almost like the other districts in town. You got the Cargo District and you got the North Fourth. The Cotton Exchange is almost its own entity. I'm surprised, because you got the beautiful signs on the back of the building. One's painted on the brick, right? And then one is down below. It's that kind of tan and green. I'm surprised it's not following that same theme, but I get, Chairman, I get your point. We have, there's a spirit towards supporting historic buildings, and I agree.
Yeah, like I generally, my sign issues, I generally stick, but for something for us to consider. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Anyone have a thought of a motion?
I'd like to propose a motion that we grant the variance on 307 North Front Street as requested based on the 4 findings of fact.
All right, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay, that would pass like 4 to 1. So thank you. We'll move on to item number 5. Item number 5 involves 5417 Park Avenue. It's a variance to allow accessory dwelling unit to exceed the allowed square footage set forth in the City Code, Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-20, subsection D. At this time, I'll recognize for the city presentation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have 5417 Park Avenue. The subject property is zoned R15 and is Lot 3, located in Block 3 of the Greenwood Estates subdivision and recorded in New Hanover County Register at Map Book 4, page 7 in July of 1941. The subject property contains a 1,425 square foot single-family structure constructed circa 2004, an attached 1,049 square foot garage constructed circa 2006, both of which are permitted uses in the R15 district. City Code Section 18-200 accessory dwelling unit sets forth standards for a detached ADU, allowing detached ADUs to be 50% of the gross floor area of the principal structure or 1,200 square feet, whichever is less. Current city code will allow will permit an ADU that totals 712.5 square feet for the entire structure at this location due to the square footage of the primary structure. On or about March 8, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to Land Development Code Section 18-200 dimensional standards for accessory buildings and structures, maximum building structure size. The applicant has requested to convert the first floor of the existing garage into 1,049 square feet of living space, which requires a variance of 336.5 square feet. The applicant has not submitted for building permits at this time. The applicant states that the strict application of the current ordinance does not allow for the proposed conversion of the garage into an ADU and creates an unnecessary hardship because the existing area that has been finished cannot be used as an ADU. The applicant further states that this is the use that is permitted in the R15 district and that the structure is ideally suited to be used as an ADU. The city's comprehensive plan encourages the creations of ADUs and additional housing opportunities throughout the city. The applicant also states that while the proposal would exceed the allowed square footage of 50%, it would still remain under the allowed limit of 1,200 square feet if the primary structure was large enough to approve the ADU of that size. This matter is set forth for hearing before the Board of Adjustment on April 20th, 2023, and subsequently continue to the May 18th, 2023 meeting due to not having a full complement of the board. This case is subject to the 4 findings of fact, and I submit all materials in this presentation into record. Staff is present for questions, and the applicant is also present.
Does anyone have any questions at this point? All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Before we move forward, well, just to make sure we've caught everyone, we'll do swearing in. We're all over the place on that. So I just want to see if anyone has not been sworn in yet, if you could raise your hand. And okay, if we can go ahead and have everyone that hasn't been sworn in, please stand and be sworn in. I knew Mr. Hatcher was already sworn in, but I appreciate him standing up again. Thank you. Always good. All right, we will move forward with the applicant's presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name's Matt Nichols. I'm an attorney in Wilmington. I'm here this afternoon representing the applicant and property owner, Coniston LLC, and my client, Evan Abramowitz, is with me here today, too, to answer any questions the board may have. We did have a presentation that I think will help explain the variance request. And this is the property here on Park Avenue. There's an existing residence there now. You'll see from the pictures to follow, and there's an existing accessory structure there now. My client bought the property in May of 2022, so about a year ago. My client also owns the properties to the rear, so that's on Wrightsville Avenue at 5414 and 5416. So as we go through the presentation, you'll see that my client would be the one directly behind this property. This is Google Street View from about a year ago. You can see the existing accessory structure to the left, and then the existing residence. And then if you go back in time, a few of these street views, you can see in 2007, it's essentially the same. The structure and the accessory structure have been there for some time. Here's 2012. And here's 2019. And what is being proposed today is to convert that accessory structure into an ADU, no increase in square footage. This is simply to allow for that to be converted to an ADU, and obviously the dimensions and the building itself have been there for quite some time. If you look down Park Avenue to the west, you can see the church property. This is right at the intersection of French Road and Park Avenue, and the subject property is off to the right there. And then here's a just a little different vantage point. You can see the church and then the subject property to the left. And then down a little further, you can see the adjacent residence on the west and the subject property there on the right-hand side. And then looking back up Park Avenue, this is a really, I would say, very low-traveled street in comparison to most streets in Wilmington. So we would contend that adding an ADU is not going to add any significant traffic impact to the neighborhood. If you look at the property from Wrightsville Avenue, so looking sort of at the rear of the accessory structure in the middle of the screen, you can see it from Wrightsville Avenue. You'll see the church there, but really showing this to show my client owns the vacant lot that's next to it, behind it, and also owns the adjacent residence that is also located behind it. There's a survey in the board's packet, I believe it's Exhibit B. And if you look at the survey, you'll see that the existing accessory structure really far exceeds the side setback. It's only 5 feet under the code, but we're roughly at about 18 feet. And it does meet the rear 5-foot setback, but again, the only affected, and I would say there's really no impact, but that would be to my client in the rear. I just point this out that it also exceeds the principal side setback in the R15, which is only 10 feet. So there's quite a bit of distance there for the R15 district. I won't go through these in detail. I think I've shown these before, but this is the city staff presentation about, really what an asset and benefit that ADUs are to the city. I won't read all these, but there's just a number of benefits. It helps with meeting the housing demand, and there's really no impact, so to speak, on the neighborhoods. And then I really like this slide staff put together where you can see neighborhood character before the ADU and neighborhood character after the ADU. Again, really essentially no difference in the change to the neighborhood. I won't read through these either, but we would respectfully contend that supporting ADUs where you can and appropriate is certainly in favor of a number of policies in the comprehensive plan. In fact, there's a section in there that talks about construction of these ADUs should be allowed to provide housing options in areas with existing infrastructure and access to goods and services. This is a central area of the city. It's really an ideal location for an ADU. Now, to get to the actual calculation of what we're requesting today, this is from the New Hanover County tax records, and you can see that the main building is 1425 gross floor area. The garage is shown as 720 feet based on the dimensions. I would point out that the city land development code definition of gross floor area is a little is unique, and it kind of uniquely applies to this property because the city defines gross floor area as the sum of gross horizontal areas of all floors, and it's measured from exterior face of the exterior walls. So that's where we're using that for the purposes of based off the tax records, which it gives you the exterior dimensions. If you go back to the photograph, you'll see that this is sort of unusual because we don't really have exterior walls on two sides of the ADU, or I'm sorry, to the top floor, and I'll show you a photograph. It's the way that the roof is pitched, it's sort of hard to calculate the exact square footage of the room that's above the finished room over the garage. But what we've done is based upon the real estate listing information, we've got the number from that, and we believe that to be accurate. Here's a picture, if you were to look out those French doors toward Park Avenue, of what is essentially there now. This picture was taken a few months ago, but the inside has not been changed, and then here's the back. And you can see there's a small sort of half bath in the corner there. I will point out too that my client has not been using this as an ADU. This is not a situation where he was using it and got cited. He is purposely not used it as an ADU, and he's been working with the city to go through to see the steps necessary to convert it to an ADU. And then it was identified of all the different criteria that really all he would need to convert the existing garage and include this upper space here would be a variance from the dimensional requirement. We still fall under that 1,200 square foot cap So we're under that, and I'll show you the calculation page, so we're not asking for that to be exceeded. It's really a function of the house has 1,425 square feet, and the code says you can't exceed 50% of that. And that's where if you take the garage ground floor and the top, you exceed it by approximately 340 square feet. So, long way of saying, based on the chart, the existing residents, based on the tax records, would have a gross floor area of 1,425. Under the current code, the ADU allowed would be about 7.5 square feet. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that the garage, based on the tax records, has a footprint of 720, and then based upon the information we have, we would say that the room over the garage is about 329, and so we are proposing a 1,409 square foot ADU, but under a strict application of the ordinance, we would only be allowed 712 and a half feet. So that makes the variance requesting today is approximately 336 and a half square feet. I think that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman. We're glad to answer questions. Just to touch on the 4 variance criteria real quick, I know the board knows it very well. We would contend that this is really an excellent case to be considered for a variance. The building is existing. We're not proposing any changes to the building, and the building predates the code requirement. We would meet the side setbacks. The applicant owns the property to the rear, and it even said if this was allowed and he's allowed to convert it, he could even stage equipment or things on the back, the vacant lot behind him, to minimize any impact. You have a church that's adjacent to the property. ADUs are certainly favored, and this is really just a function of the size, and the building was built pre the ordinance. Unnecessary hardship, it really would make no practical reason, and I think it would create an unnecessary hardship to try to modify that building in some way to sort of bring it into within the square footage. Other things, I guess if you added onto the house, you wouldn't really need the variance, but that seems unnecessary to try to add on to the house to try to get that ratio different. So we would contend it would detract from the property in the way it looks. It looks nice now. The property, I think the variance request is unique to the property in the sense that this particular to this house and this accessory structure. My client bought the property about a year ago, so he certainly didn't create the situation. And then as to the 4th criteria, we would just respectfully contend that clearly this is in the spirit and intent of the ordinance, which is to favor ADUs. The city very recently increased the 900 square foot maximum up to 1,200 square feet. So again, I think the city's seeing a lot of value in these ADUs. And this is just a situation where strict application, it doesn't quite meet it. With a variance, we could meet it, and we appreciate your consideration. Glad to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
I've got a question. Are you going to be cutting stairs from the first floor to the second floor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And I would emphasize, this is one unit. It's not trying to create an upper unit and a lower unit. That would not be allowed. So this would be one unit. And it would just really allow utilization of the current space and then the bottom space to make it really a functional unit.
Any other questions for the applicant? I'm sorry, for Mr. Nichols? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other information from the city so far on this one? Take it. All right. We will move forward to the evidentiary hearing and open that up for parties that would like to, non-parties would like to speak related to information that's competent and material substantive, sorry, I can't talk today, evidence that's relevant to the matter. Is there anyone that would like to speak? All right. All right, moving on from that, is there any other comments from Mr. Nichols? Do you have anything else while we're in?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. Does the city have anything further on the related while we're in the public side?
Nothing further from the city.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing and move. Does anyone have any Thoughts on this one?
I'm looking for the information about the parking for ADUs. Isn't there certain parking requirements for the ADUs? Because they just have the one single driveway here for the two properties.
There are currently requirements for off-street parking for like ADUs that would be used for short-term lodging and then for dwelling units that are outside of the city's 1945 corporate limits, which this is. So yes, but that parking doesn't have to be the same as like a commercial parking lot. It can be stacked down a driveway, if that makes sense, so that, you know.
So this one meets it because it's got the long skinny driveway. They could stack them if they wanted to.
It doesn't appear that parking would be an issue for the site.
Anybody have any other thoughts?
I think ADUs are certainly of importance now, and I think the city has shown that. And in this instance, we're not increasing the footprint of either structure, so the change to the surroundings is really non-existent. It's just an internal upfit to make the garage an ADU.
And looking at the findings of fact, in a certain way, it's kind of, the main property is peculiar. It's quite small. So it's hard to have an ADU that is that much smaller than a small residence to begin with.
Right.
So it seems like it could fall within that category of the findings of fact.
Okay.
I'd agree.
All right. Does anyone have the thoughts of a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant the variance based on the 4 findings of fact.
I'll second.
All right. It's been a motion and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on.
Please, yeah, thank you.
Been requested to take a quick recess. We'll take a 10-minute recess, and we'll be. All right, we're going to go ahead and ask everyone to turn to your seats. All right, we're going to call to order back to the Board of Adjustments. We're going to move on to item number 6. Item number involves the property at 5709 Wrightsville Avenue. This is an appeal of zoning administrator's determination that trees were removed from the subject property in violation of the City Code Section 18-316, the tree preservation, and then 18-317, tree removal. We will start with recognizing the preliminary statement from the city.
Thank you, Catherine Thurston, City Zoning Administrator. This is an appeal from staff's determination that trees were removed in violation from the subject property. This property is zoned multi-dwelling residential, and it consists of the common area for 32 single-dwelling structures. You can see each of the homes have a rectangular footprint above, and then the right-of-way and the surrounding area would be considered common area. Each of the house footprints contains approximately 3,024 square feet, which makes the entire site come in at a density of approximately 5 units per acre. Within common areas and open spaces of residential developments, a tree removal permit is required to remove street trees, buffers, or any other tree that's used to satisfy landscaping requirements. Pursuant to City Code, there are criteria by which a tree may be removed, which includes to accommodate essential site improvements, when a tree is dead or dying, when it's causing a disruption to utility services, or if it's otherwise shown to be a threat to public health or safety. The applicant did not request a permit for the removal of trees from the subject property. On or about January 18th, 2023, the applicant met with the Board of Directors for the community and authorized removal of the subject trees. One of their contractors, U.S. Lawns, sent an email, which is contained within your attachments, to advise the applicant that they should contact the city prior to removal of the trees. On or about January 23rd, 2023, that was a Monday, city staff received several complaints from callers who identified themselves as residents of the neighborhood, stating that trees had been removed from the Shell Road Village right-of-way within the neighborhood's common area. On or about January 23rd, 2023, the same day, Officer Lunsford, who is here with us this afternoon, inspected the subject property and confirmed that 9 cherry trees that ranged in caliper inch from 7 to 13 inches had been removed from the subject property without the required permits. I have some, these are the general locations of the trees that were removed, the red dots shown in the front yards adjacent to the Shell Road Village right-of-way. Here's some pictures of those trees, along with the measurements. The required mitigation for the trees that were removed is 130.5 caliper inches of trees. Each tree that is used to satisfy mitigation requirements has to be at least 2 caliper inches at the time of planting. The notice of violation for the removal of these trees with the mitigation requirements was mailed January 27th to the property owner, the property manager, and the landscaping contractors who were involved with the project. On February 27th, the applicant submitted an appeal of the notice of violation to the city clerk. On May 1st, 2023, Officer Lunsford reissued a notice of violation to Fitness Tree Service due to their initial notice having been returned. The applicant has met with city staff on several occasions, including April 12th and 24th, to discuss a proposed settlement. We do not have a settlement for consideration this afternoon. This matter is set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment today. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have of city staff, but I believe that the applicant has also planned to make a presentation to the board.
All right, is there any questions for city staff at this point? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, because this is an appeal, this just requires a simple majority of this board. And also just to ask again, if anyone has not been sworn in, since we took the recess, we aren't able to really tell who has. Is anyone that's going to speak need to be sworn in before we go further? I knew Catherine was, so we were good. All right, we'll move forward. Would the applicant like to come forward?
Thank you. I have,
Sir, if I, just for the, once you get situated, yeah. What we'll do first, we just need you to introduce yourself, give us your name and your address first.
my name is Paul Cezak. I reside at 5617 Shell Road Village Drive. I am one of the 32 homeowners of this community.
All right, thank you, sir. And if any information you want to give, we can give it to the city and they'll pass it out for you. Well, how about we get started and then we'll move on to that. Yeah, we'll be able to look at everything.
The two documents that I have provided you today The first one is the photographs, and it wasn't until just 2 days ago that that first photograph became available to us. We really didn't have pictures of the trees and the conditions that they were in, but a neighbor realized that they could go to Google Maps and pull up that address, and that is the picture of the flowering cherry tree with the heavy lichen infection all over the branches. So that was the tree, that's an example of the 7 trees that were infected and involved in this. Now, if I can, the other photographs, by the way, the last 2 photographs show the current state, the replacement live oak trees that have been put in place, and a shot of the community, a street view of the community. Let me first just point out that Shell Road Village is mostly live oak trees, big old mature live oak trees. A member of my community, Linda Moore, has a detailed map of how many trees exist in this residential neighborhood. But in fact, most of them on both the entrance side and the cul-de-sac side, the end of the road, are huge live oak mature trees. There was just in the middle of the community that there were these flowering cherry trees. So I'll turn to some brief comments that are in this PowerPoint presentation next. Over a period of the last 4 or 5 years, this non-native species lining the middle of the community developed this crusty growth. In fact, I have physical branches that were saved from the trees being removed and mulched. As a condition progressed, in 2020, the Board of Directors contacted Lloyd Singleton, an exec director and arborist at the Extension Office on Oleander Drive. He came and met with the homeowners and identified this as a lichen condition. Lichens are an unusual plant composed of a fungus and an algae living together in the same body. Moving into the next page, Shell Road Village homeowners learned that the lichens occur in abundance on plants that are declining in health and are dying. And in that literature, the photographs I gave you is a copy of the Extension Office documentation defining the lichens. Shell Road Village had several varieties of flowering trees. The others were fine. It was this non-native species that became infected. Moving on to the third page, from 2020 to 22, the board discussed plans and approaches for replacing them. Live oak trees were eventually selected as the replacement because they're well known as beautiful trees, hardy, can withstand Carolina hurricanes, and our lawn service organization, our vendor, was given the plans and provided us with options and costs. So all of this culminated on January 18th at our community's annual meeting. At that point, the project was approved, and the vendor was notified that he could proceed with that, with the project. All right, we have a management community agency, CAMS, and U.S. Lawns and Fitness Trees that are all party to this project. I will tell you that at the time that the decision was made to proceed with the project, none of the 3 members of the Board of Directors knew that a permit was required to cut down a sick or dead or dying tree. It is true, however, in an email that the planning group has, that a member of our board who had the responsibility for deal with the landscaping company was advised to contact the city. and he said, look, these trees are sick and dying. They're lichen infected. I don't need to contact the city. So admittedly, there is a communication. I will say, however, that I'm a member of that board, and other members of the board were not aware that that conversation took place and should have taken that precautionary step to contact the city. So moving along, we had very quickly, as soon as the vendor was given that information, that following Monday morning, he had a work crew out there and cut the trees down and chopped them up and came back later to remove the stumps a couple of days later. In fact, we didn't even have a chance to send an email out to the community that that was going to happen. Anyone who was at the meeting, annual meeting January 18th, knew about it. But if you weren't at the meeting, you didn't know that that action was taking place. So it startled a lot of neighbors to see these trees being cut down and mulched. So moving on to the next page, the extenuating circumstances. We now acknowledge that a permit was required. However, Shell Road Village homeowners were not aware that the requirements were there. All of us did not know that. A 4-inch tree or greater, you have to ask permission to cut that tree down. While a permit was not obtained, we were issued a fine of $4,450, a citation with a fine for taking this action without getting the permit. Now, while the trees were not yet dead, as the photograph, the first photograph on it shows you, they were in a rapid period of decline. It had been accumulating over several years. So you not only have that photograph, but I have a bag of branches that shows you the extent of what those branches looked like to the people who lived in those yards, as well as the community in general that would drive past those trees. I want to make it clear that Shell Road Village HOA is a not-for-profit LLC. In fact, we're just a simple co-op. I own the land, according to the code, underneath my building, and I pay city property taxes on the basis of that land. But I am one of 32 members of a co-op that decided to get together and have a co-op do that, those common areas. In fact, of the 32 front yards, it would seem reasonable to me that my front yard is my front yard, not somebody else's. I'm one of 32 homeowners in the group. In a sense, when you look at it, we're 32 homeowners, plain and simple. Not a business, not an LLC, we're 32 property owners. Given that information, we're requesting extenuating circumstances that what appears to be the application of the citation is, in one way, really not fair and equitable to 32 homeowners. So we ask, what have 32 homeowners at Shell Road Village done that's in conflict with the city's mission regarding trees in the city? We're asking for a fair, equitable, reasonable, and logical application of code to our situation. We have, as homeowners, paid $7,375 to remove those sick and dying trees, and paid $14,750 to replace them with healthy, new live oak. And you saw the photograph that I gave you of the new live oak tree in that front yard. So, having been issued a citation for $4,500, and we're also asking for no mitigation requirements. It seems to be my understanding that if we had taken no action and waited for those trees just to die, and cut them down dead, there would have been no mitigation requirements. Because they were not fully dead, the mitigation requirements seem to be being applied to our situation. So, and the last comment there is for your own discretion to read. You know, we see developments going on all over the city. Hundreds, thousands of trees are being cut down, and we ask for a fair, equitable look at what we did. What did we do? We saw 7 trees that are highly infected, took them down, replaced them with live oaks. So we're acknowledging that, okay, we didn't ask for the permit. Instead of $4,500 as a citation to us, make it $1,000. And us and CAMS and US Lawns and Fitness Tree, we all acknowledge that never do that again without a permit. But there should be no other mitigation requirements either, because those healthy live oaks that we planted are 3 inches in diameter. They don't meet the 12-inch diameters that some of those cherry trees that were still slightly alive were. I have one other member of the community, Linda Moore. Linda's here. She has a document that shows you the layout of our community with representations of how many large mature trees are all over this community, while we have these few flowering cherries that are now replaced with live oaks. So if I may, I'll turn the microphone over to Linda Moore.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Linda Moore, and I live at 5614 Shell Road, Village Drive. If you could refer to the map of Shell Road with all the dots. As Paul has stated, we're in a 30-year-old patio home community sitting on about 7 acres of property. There are 32 3-bedroom homes. About half of our owners are retired. We've been assigned 160 inches of tree mitigation. In other words, about 80 trees. In March, as Paul said, we planted 6 live oaks and 1 maple, and that leaves us about 146 inches left. That's an approximate value of $25,500. This is quite a hardship for our community for more than one reason. As you can see from the map, our community was planned with a very heavy tree canopy. The pink dots represent live oak trees, the ones that we've planted, the ones that were there. Also, the green dots show remaining trees, mostly maples and other types of oaks. We have large street trees, either right in front of each house or slightly to the side. Trees were also planted around the retention pond in a couple of places along our southern border and near our entry. Since this property was formerly a tree farm and before that a family farm, it has several areas of woods shown by the green lines. All of our corners and the odd-shaped land on the other side of the creek along our western border are heavily wooded. This land on the far side of the creek is either inaccessible and/or swampy. Shown in blue are 2 county stormwater easements, which, as you know, prohibit plantings of any major size. Taking into account the large amount of property occupied by our homes, our driveways, the street, the pond, our mailboxes, and these 2 easements, there's very, very little space for more trees. Yes, there are a few places where a tree or 2 could be planted, but simply not enough room to really impact that 80 tree requirement. The second part of our hardship plea is the fact that we have only 32 homeowners. Half are retired and mostly on fixed incomes. That remaining mitigation amount of $25,550 approximately will be very difficult for 32 homeowners to handle. With these constraints in mind, we ask that the mitigation amount be greatly reduced. Thank you.
Thank you. One closing comment? Yes, sir.
In talking with some of my neighbors, you know, the only thought that I'll offer you here as I close is that if you really look at what the problem was, these sick and dying trees, and what we did to resolve it, you could almost ask the question, why didn't we get a commendation for doing that after spending $22,000 instead of being issued fines? Thanks for your consideration.
All right, thank you, sir. Does anyone have any, anyone have questions for the applicant at this point?
How many live oaks did you say you planted to replace the cherries that were cut down?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So how many live oaks were planted to replace the cherry trees that were cut down? How many live oaks have you planted to date?
We planted 7.
7, thank you.
I'm so sorry. We can't hear you. You don't speak into the microphone.
Oh, yeah, we planted 7.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we probably will have some other questions down the road, but for right now, anyone have any question for me? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does the city have anything in relationship to the presentation?
I actually have a couple of questions for the applicant, if I may.
Sir, would you mind coming back up to the microphone?
Yes.
At the January 18th meeting of the board, I understand that there are 3 members that sit on the board of directors. Is that the extent of the people who were present?
I'm sorry, I have my hand.
I'm sorry. Was anyone present at that January 18th board of directors meeting other than you and 2 other members? Can you state the names of those present at that meeting?
I don't, the question was what other members were there. I don't have the roster or minutes from that meeting, but there were the 3 members of the board, there was our CAMS representative, and there were several homeowners there. One in particular I know specifically is Tammy Martin at 5619.
And then your wife was there.
Yes.
Ms. Moore, are you one of the original complainants that the trees were being removed from this property or had been removed from this property without permits?
Could we, I'm sorry, we have to, if we don't have it in a microphone, we can't hear it, the public can't hear it. Apologize. Catherine, could you ask that?
Yes, I called a friend who worked for the city to find out if we had a tree permit.
Okay. And you are aware of other members of the community who called to complain about the tree removal?
I know that some people called. I don't know their names. I just heard that they called.
Thank you. Were you present at the January 18th meeting of the Board of Directors?
No. No, I was not.
Do you know the names of any other people who were?
I know that Tammy Martin was, the 3 board members, and Paul's wife was present.
By the way, I'll ask the homeowners that are here this afternoon to raise their hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the city of the applicant?
No further questions for the applicant. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have of city staff relative to the case.
All right. So we'll probably have some more questions for you later, but right now we're good.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Catherine?
Just so I'm clear, looking at the original citation, it says they can, just make sure I'm reading it right, they can either pay $4,450 or they can plant 160 inches of trees, or no?
Both are required. The monetary penalty is for removing trees without a permit. And then there's also mitigation required to replant trees whenever they've been removed, whether with or without a permit.
Okay.
And I'd like to also add, with regard to the citation amount, the city doesn't have in place a stricter penalty for people who remove trees without a permit whenever they're aware that a permit is required. Had staff issued penalties using the stricter standard, that amount would have been $13,350. So the applicant has already been given the benefit of the doubt that they were not aware that tree removal permits were required, and that's despite having emails that would indicate otherwise.
Okay, do we know how many inches of trees they planted back in place? Is that relevant?
My understanding is that each of the trees planted back were right around 2 caliper inches. However, we've not inspected those trees to date.
There were 7 of those trees planted, so that'd be 14 caliper inches, I guess, roughly.
That is correct.
I guess that what we're asking some questions regarding the city council establishes, they vote on the types of fines that are assessed.
That's correct. They review the fee schedule annually, and the fines for tree removal are within the city's fee schedule.
And that's important because the fee schedule falls outside of your purview.
Right.
So what you will be able to do is vote on the questions that are before you and whether the notice of violation was properly issued. If you find that it was properly issued, then it would be up to the applicants, or I'm sorry, the appellants to negotiate with city management, with the assistance of city staff and my office on a mitigation amount.
Right. I just wanted to get that out. There was a talk about a lessening, and we don't have that authority.
That's correct. You don't have that authority to
Our
lessen.
decision is limited to 3 questions.
Yes, sir.
And just establishing the ownership side, and it is an established HOA that is a registered tax-exempt nonprofit in the county. Is that just for legal purposes for the?
Could you repeat that? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry. The HOA entity itself is it's filed through as a tax-exempt entity that takes over the management of that entity. They're recognized by the county and the city as
Correct, yes.
the entity of that
Yes,
is
sir.
this responsible entity.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, we will move into the evidentiary hearing. Once again, I'll ask if anyone that's speaking, please let us know if you have not been sworn in. We're going to open up to non-parties that would like to present to the public any information that's competent, materials, substantive evidence that's relevant to this matter, and I ask that you please come forward, and when you come forward, please state your name and your address. Seeing that there aren't any, we'll move on to a few other questions while we're in this part of the process. Do you have any questions for city and staff that would be related to additional? Okay. I guess we can close the evidentiary and then we'll go into discussions then. Okay. At this time, we'll close the evidentiary hearing and go into discussions. We can have, the applicant has the right to come up and any type of rebuttal you'd like to present this time. There haven't been any public comments, but you've talked to the city. Do you have anything? All right, thank you. Does the city have anything else they would like to?
I believe that the form of rebuttal for the city, I will just point out that the decision before the board today are the items on the screen in front of you. I believe the applicant has stipulated that they are aware now that a tree removal permit was required. And with that, I would say that city staff is not aware in the issuance of a notice of violation. Can everyone hear me?
No, we're still having trouble.
I've killed 2 mice. So I believe that the applicant is asking that the board consider things that, as your attorney has pointed out, are not necessarily within your purview, which is the amount of the fine. They've also asked staff to take consideration into the party that is responsible for the payment, which is not under staff's purview nor the board's. And they've also asked for consideration as to whether or not they acted in good faith in the removal of the trees, which, you know, we are not treating this case as though we have reason to doubt that they did act in good faith, because as stated previously, the fine would have been significantly higher if we did believe that to be the case. I will say that we have worked with some of their contractors in the past. One in particular that was mentioned, Fitness Tree Service, does have a history with the city in removing trees without obtaining the required permits, and we do have prior cases. One that I'll bring up is 4303 Audubon. Officer Lunsford will correct me if I'm sorry, it's 1403 Audubon Boulevard was another instance in which trees were removed by that particular company without obtaining the required permits. And the significance of that is that whenever Officer Lunsford spoke to the site superintendent, he stated that he knew that he needed a permit, but that it wasn't his problem. And so with that, the city is reluctant to, the city zoning staff is reluctant to agree to a settlement in this instance.
Okay. And I guess, again, that wouldn't be up to our decision. We'll see if the process was done correctly, and then have to depend on that, depending on what the outcome is.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And then in just talking about procedurally for the board and with these three questions being front, is it that we should address each question individually, or is it?
Well, you can discuss them in your deliberations. You don't have to make a motion on them individually.
Okay,
no.
I just wanted, before we got into that, I figured
Right.
I'd ask you
Yes,
now,
sir.
then ask later, which is sort of the
And
concept.
Catherine, you said if once this is determined, if it's determined that the answers to these three questions are yes, that they can negotiate with the city as far as the mitigation cost, is that correct?
They do still have the opportunity to request a settlement with the city, and that would be under the purview of our city manager's office.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions? No. Are we good? Don't have to reopen for rebuttal? Okay, yes, sir.
My thought is about these vendors. As a homeowner, I sure would have wished that all of these other supporting organizations, CAMS, US Lawns, and Fitness Tree, would have told the community or told the board, I'm not going to cut those trees down without a permit. But we were not told that. And they proceeded to act without communicating that specifically to us. Thank you.
I have one other question for you. The trees that were cut down,
Oh,
sir?
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 I'm sorry, one more question.
Yes.
The trees that were cut down, were the homeowners aware at the time that they were going to be cut down? I know you said that if they weren't part of that meeting, they were unaware that the trees were going to be cut down.
Please repeat that. My hearing is diminished.
Okay. So were the homeowners where the trees were cut down, were they aware, or did they just show up one morning and their trees were gone?
Can you repeat that again?
His question is, were the homeowners in Shell Road Village aware that the trees were going to be removed prior to their removal? In other words, did you send out a notice to the homeowners?
Only
saying-
through those that attended the annual meeting. That happened so quickly, we didn't even get a chance to send out, we typically send out an email to all 32 homeowners that the trees were cut down before we got a chance to do that Monday morning.
Okay, so the 7 homeowners where the trees were cut down, were they aware, or did they just come home and their trees were gone?
The ones that are here today would know that, but there would be some that did not know that that tree was going to be cut down, right?
Okay, thank you.
All right, I guess have a discussion. And
The issue we have now is that what we can do is limited. I mean, very limited, you know, where the trees removed from the subject property. Well, you know, I think the answer to that is yes. Was a tree removal permit required? Well, I think the answer to that is yes, and I think Shell Road knows that. Maybe during, but certainly after the fact, did the city staff err in the issuance of a notice of violation relative to the property? And I think the answer there is no, because the trees were removed without a permit. My big thing is, you know, can Shell Road negotiate with the city as far as the cost of mitigation, which is significant?
Yeah, and I mean, you have an HOA does hire contractors and should require insurance and things of that nature. Plus,
I agree.
And we don't give advice at all, but there's probably a directors and officers policy that exists for this entity because for something that happens in this nature. But it is unfortunate, but I agree with you that like based on what we're allowed to do, it is we're very limited in where we can go with this.
I agree.
Any further discussion, or does anyone have a motion as how to move forward? It would be either appealing the zoning administrator's determination or upholding it. Am I?
Well, at least the sound works.
Okay, we'll do that again, I guess. But just for the, so we're just, all right, I've turned this off, so hopefully, I've just turned it all the way back, so hopefully you can hear us. So we are basically making a decision to uphold the zoning administrator's decision or to overrule it. And that would be what the motion would be for. And anyone have the motion either way?
I would make a motion to uphold city staff recommendation.
All right, there's been a motion to uphold that determination. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it has been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is passed 5-0. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 7. Oh, you're right, sorry. Item number 8, 7 was continued. All right. This item involves subject property 1227 South 3rd Street and 309 Kidder Street. It is a variance request based on the requirements in the Urban Mixed Use District pursuant to City Code, Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-343. I'll first acknowledge the city and their preliminary statements of the case.
Thank you, Chairman Hubbis. This request is for a variance to the access requirements in the Urban Mixed Use District. The subject property consists of 2 parcels that are zoned UMX, and the owner plans to recombine them into a single parcel and develop townhomes with 16 off-street parking spaces. The city's land development code states that where alleyways can be used to accommodate automobile access, then it shall be, and parking shall only be accessed from those alleyways. This lot has frontage on South 3rd Street, Kidder Street, and Simon Street, which is classified as an alley. This is the applicant's proposed development project. And this shows, this is from Eagle View, a city program showing another aerial of the property. The applicant submitted a request for a variance on April 5th, 2023 from section 18343, subsection C2A, to allow the subject property access off of Kidder Street instead of Simon Street. And that's, you can vaguely see in the aerial where that driveway access along Kidder Street would be. The applicant states that the alley is a notable low point for drainage of the entire city block, as shown in attachment 3, and significant civil engineering and analysis would be required to design a solution for the drainage that's created by the topography of the block as a whole. The applicant also states that the proposed design has incorporated all roof runoff and parking lot runoff into rain gardens and catch basins, and that it has maximized the building and parking area without exceeding the 10,000 square foot threshold for a full stormwater permit. Should the applicant be required to access from the alley, the impervious area would exceed that limit and it would trigger on-site underground stormwater retention. And the applicant also states that accessing off of the alley would result in the loss of 6 parking spaces. This matter is set for hearing today, May 18th, 2023. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have of city staff, and the applicant is also here to give a brief presentation on the project. And I have just a couple more slides, and then the variance request. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have any questions at this point? All right, thank you. All right, we'll ask the applicant to come up and make their presentation.
Can you hear me all right?
Until we.
I know if you speak too close, it gets really loud. Is that about right?
You should be good. Yeah.
Okay. There were some more slides that showed, there's some graphics that were color that we created
And just for the record, sir, can we just get you to state your name and address just for the
Okay,
starting purposes?
I'm Kevin Furman. I'm the architect and the designer for the project. I'm here representing Stephen Hurlbert, the owner.
All right, thank you.
And he's here as well.
We're good. I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
We had a few additional slides that I wanted to show you all. I don't know if you all got the packet that had the colorized version of the topography. It was a pretty helpful graphic that made clear the main hardship that is associated with developing the property, or at least improving that alley.
I believe it's page 32 of
I think it's called
packet.
Exhibit A in our
Yes.
submission.
Yes, sir. Mhm.
You don't have it in color, do you?
No, we have it in black and
Oh,
white.
it's really impressive. It's like got 10 shades of blue on there. But this is really where it all begins. It begins also with another Exhibit E. Almost 4 years ago when we had an offer to purchase the property, my concern was I sure hope I don't have to develop this alley to access the property because it's a mud pit. And our offer to purchase the property was contingent on that. So I sent Nicole Smith at that time an email that said, hey, could you confirm that we don't have to develop that alley? And I know the rule has changed. The new LDC has come in since then, obviously, and that changed everything. But she, in Exhibit E, it says that she reached out to engineering and no infrastructure improvements, including sidewalk, would be required along Simon Street with the proposed redevelopment. It goes on to discuss trees and things like that. So we proceeded with the property, and of course, lots of delays over the last few years in getting projects off the ground with all sorts of reasons, but we finally got a good idea what we wanted to do here, and we had some success with LaRue, a block away. You might be familiar with that project. It's very similar in scale. 8 units that has the red balconies on Martin and 3rd. And so a real similar situation where we just want to access the parking lot from right there. You got it. That's what we want to do. We just want to come off of that side road like that. In fact, Simon Street was a paper road, and I had to get that closed for the city council to make that project happen with planning's recommendation. And they deeded the land back to us so we could put a parking lot on it. It didn't make sense to access it through an alleyway because also that alleyway just terminated at a railroad. But that's essentially what we want to do. And the basic organization of our project is very similar to that. And if you can imagine, you see where those shipping containers are. if we were to access that parking lot from the side and then turn left into the parking lot of that development, you would lose a bunch of parking spaces and create a whole bunch more impervious area. But I just put that one there just to let you guys know that we got a stake in this neighborhood too, and we're trying to do some really cool projects in the area. So let's see, that same Exhibit E states from Rob Gordon. I told Rob that we were going to have to file for a variance to have this exact parking configuration. And he said he didn't really have an issue with it, and it was just a code requirement. So I asked him if he would at least write me an email to that effect that said it wasn't going to be a safety hazard or it wouldn't really change things. So he did. He wrote an email to me on April 4th this year. It said, "There are no technical concerns from engineering with a driveway off Kidder. The only caveats are to provide required site distance, and if there's a gate, proper queuing distance and between the gate and the street," which we already, I think, have resolved in that site plan as designed. So there was no safety concerns, or I'm wondering if it's an aesthetic concern to have to access the parking from the alley, because I don't think there would be much aesthetic difference. You still see the parking lot, and I don't know if seeing that parking lot is so bad, because there's some really nice trees in that parking lot that we planted. So I'm not quite sure how much better it would be, but I can tell you how it creates a hardship for us. So in that Exhibit A, you'll see that the topography, I pulled that graphic straight off of Wilmington's GIS topography maps. And we color-coded it just from light to dark to show you that darkest area of that map. There you go. Oh, that looks good. That big X, that's our property. And you can see it's the low spot of the entire block. Water from Kidder Street. There's no curb there to keep that water off of Kidder Street from running down into that bottom. All those properties up on 4th Street, that's a pretty steep gradient behind all those little bungalows. And all that water runs straight down to that spot right there. And it's muddy, and you'll get stuck there if you go there a couple days after a rain. And my concern is that if we were going to pave that alley, there's a lot to consider. I don't think I could, in good faith, just put down 2 feet of curb on each side of a 16-foot piece of pavement and think nothing was going to happen. I think it's a pretty big project. And I think a project like that is, it might entail, well, it would entail, you'd have to catch all that water. You'd have to study how big those drains would have to be, how much water is coming down that alley and out of those backyards. How big are the storm drains? They're going to have to go underground and tie into the stormwater in Kidder Street. And it's a project stopper for us, honestly. We would have to consider another project that was larger with no parking, a completely different animal. And we don't want to do this. We think this is a pretty cool project, and we had a lot of success with LaRue. Let's see, so I'm just going to go down these points here. I don't think we have I imagine the city would probably want us to consult with some kind of engineer. That this is above my studies as an architect to do this, and I think that our civil engineers involved in the project is just trying to keep the project under 10,000 square feet so that we don't need an on-site stormwater retention system. Projects of this scale that can stop a project as well, especially since we have to have a private sewer main in there. I think the parking in the impervious area that more would actually be created, you would have to create more, let's see, I think it's Exhibit B. There we go. On Exhibit B, can I scroll through these myself on here? Oh, I can. Look at that. I didn't know that. Okay. Okay, so there's Exhibit B, and I just created this graphic to show how it differs from our current site plan. So I'm calling it Simon Alley. I know it's Simon Street, but it's classified as an alley. And correct me if I'm wrong, planning. If that were to be developed, it would be developed as a 16-foot wide piece of pavement with 2 curbs and gutters on each side, which I'll come back to later. But if that was paved, we would have to make a left turn into the parking lot and then another left turn. So you're doing a total 360 to get into those back parking spaces. And the turning radii required for all that, and emergency vehicles trying to get in there seems like a lot of work to just get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parking spaces where we had 16, which was 2 per unit. But parking isn't required for UMX. But we've learned that in order for these projects of this quality and this scale to be a success, you've got to provide at least 1 parking space for these townhomes. But we're not required to have any. But I think as the site plan is designed, we have 16. And this graphic shows that we would have a lot more impervious area, and it would put us over the 10,000 square foot mark. And that's kind of like the sweet spot in these size UMX properties downtown. The corners are great for this kind of development because of that side access, and you can get just the right amount of units and impervious area on there before you have to start doing all sorts of engineered stormwater retention. And what we have designed is the magic formula, and as soon as we start adding more driveways and more turning radii to get in and out of there, it puts us over the top, and then we wind up with underground retention, and that's probably a project killer too for one of this scale. We also explained how an underground stormwater retention system would conflict with the utilities that we have to install in there. We have new water lines coming in off the street. Let me go back to the site plan. There we go. So you can see right here that we've got all of our water lines coming in to the side of the parking lot and straight into here and serving each one of the buildings. We're going to try to keep this whole courtyard. This is kind of a new idea, I think, in this part of town. It's going to be all boardwalks and all gardeny, and these little blue spots represent all the places where the water comes off of the buildings and are contained and held in these little rain gardens and never even leave the center of this building, hopefully. And it's all covered with pervious boardwalks everywhere, and those pervious boardwalks project out into this parking lot. This line here represents the location of the private sewer main that we're going to have to put in there. And I've learned that trying to put a private sewer main into a project like this through a hole in the courtyard, it's not a big deal. But when you have an underground stormwater retention system underneath your parking lot, it makes it quite difficult to maintain or repair, or those types of utilities laying on top of each other. It's a difficult thing to do. We're trying to avoid that. Let's see. One of the other graphics that we used in here, let me see if I can find it. It wouldn't be after that. There we go. So all of these projects, all these lots along 3rd Street are zoned UMX, which means no building setbacks and no parking requirements. I think the intent of that is to bring that downtown development pattern to the south side. Unfortunately, there's no parking garages on the south side, so I'm not sure where those people are going to park when that does happen. But when that does happen, and these developers put buildings on these lots that go all the way to the property lines, they're going to come all the way up against this alley, and everybody that accesses these properties here, 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 there, and there, are going to have to come down this alley to get to them, if they even park there. Which makes the most sense when you have the opportunity of corner properties here and say here. If I were one to write the code, I would make it mandatory that you came in off the side street to come into these properties. It would be safer, and it would put a whole lot less stress on an alley. Alleys are only 16 feet wide. They have no sidewalks, and they have no provisions for plazas either in between the sidewalk and the buildings. They're tight, narrow little places for cars and pedestrians to navigate. This isn't, if it's 16 feet, that's not 2 ways. So I don't know how 2 cars could pass without running over this fence of these people or scraping up against the future buildings that will go up against these property lines. So the idea, and I know this isn't part of our hardship, but I think if this thing was paved by the city and made a one-way passage, that'd probably be the best solution. But having a 2-way alley right now to access what could potentially be hundreds of residents in the future isn't the plan for Simon Alley. And I think, back to the idea of paving this to this point, I don't know. We would need some help from the city to explain how to do that. And I don't know if we did pave it, if we would have to be, if you all would hire your own engineer to do that and to study what's going on there, because I don't think it's going to be simple as my engineer, Charlie Kazir from Intracoastal Engineering, just saying, all right, let's put some curb and gutter in there and be done with it. Let's see. And I guess the other part about the safety issues of the parking lot that we have as designed is, I'm going the wrong way. No, I am. Right now it's straightforward. We have all of our queuing distance. We have the great little water gardens in the parking lots. We're going to try to get the parking lots to pitch to these 4 corners as well. And we're going to try to handle everything on site without underground retention. And so you pass right through the center of this parking lot, and retention areas in each corner. And straight access, if you have emergency vehicles, they can turn and pull right in. And there's no turning around and looping and going 360 degrees. And that's about it. I know that was kind of rambling and a lot of different points to make, but we're trying to access from Kidder Street just like we did with LaRue, and not have to pave that alley.
Thank
All right, thanks. Does anyone have any questions?
you. No.
All right. Anything? You guys good? All right. I think we'll be back with some questions probably. We're gonna, anything else city-wise?
Mr. Furman had just asked, what the rationale for the requirement is, and so I just wanted to speak to that for a moment. Within the urban mixed-use district, it is a different development pattern. Uses are closer together. There isn't as much space necessarily between driveways all of the time in the UMX. And there may be multiple businesses along this street moving forward as the site continues to redevelopment. And providing that rear access that can be shared by those businesses just improves the flow of traffic along streets of a higher classification. I will add too, I just confirmed with our engineer that the any paved area that's within the right-of-way, Simon Street, would not count towards the 10,000 square foot threshold that for the applicant's stormwater plan.
Okay,
and he wouldn't be required to attenuate from that right-of-way.
all right, so, all right. Sure, we have to just come up to, yeah, you have to just come up to the podium.
Yeah, the calculations that I had, or the drawings that I had shown here, that makes this project in excess of 10,000 square feet does not account for the impervious area within the right-of-way, as you see. All of this that we're adding for new maneuverability is on our property, and that counts against us right there. All of this. It's not on Simon Street. It's on our property. Before, we just came, there's Kidder Street, it's right here. And we wouldn't have, on the site plan as designed, we're accessing it from this direction. There's very little to pave between the road and the parking lot, but here, with all of this turning business, that's ours, and that counts against our 10,000.
All right, thank you. Catherine, anything else?
Just one other thing, the applicant in Exhibit E provided an email from our engineer, Rob Gordon, with whom I've communicated regarding this project. He states that there are no technical concerns from engineering with the driveway off Kidder, which he has expressed was meant to mean that it doesn't require a waiver from engineering to have the driveway placement there,
Okay,
just to expound on that statement.
perfect, thank you. All right. Anything else? Okay, we are going to move on to the evidentiary hearing. I'm going to open up to non-parties that can, ones that come forward and speak regarding materials and substance evidence that is relevant to this matter. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? All right, well, yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Andrea Arth, a resident of downtown, and I helped Kevin Furman with the first project on LaRue. Pertaining to the parking lot, we're ultimately ethically trying to create as much space as possible for the parking to create that 16 lots for each resident. These are 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath. We're ultimately, the first one we did was 1 per. We're trying to get 2 per to alleviate the hardship for the businesses around South Front. There's not a lot of parking, so it's basically on-street parking for a majority of the businesses, except for the South Front area behind Satellite. So ultimately creating as many parking spots as possible for the residents, for the safety of the people living there, and ultimately the people parking in the businesses would be greatly appreciated.
All right, thank you. And just for the record, can you state your address?
Oh, 124 Walnut Street.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Horn, and I own and operate a small business at 1222. Also own 1220 and 1218 South 3rd Street and 1306 South 4th Street, just around the corner from this subject property. At our little small business there on the corner, parking is a premium. We rely on on-street parking. I know the intent and the spirit of the UMX, but at the same time, I think if there's an opportunity to provide off-street parking in a residential development, and there's a common sense approach, which I think has been presented, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I would ask that you consider it. And I'm in favor of seeing that corner be developed and more projects like it. I think they've set a precedence with LaRue, and they make a high-quality product. Thanks.
Right, and sir, just for the record, we need your legal address?
What?
Your legal address, just for the record?
1720 Register Lane.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to present any additional evidence to this? All right. Ma'am, you want to speak? Is it?
Hello. Yes, I haven't been sworn in yet.
Oh, you haven't been sworn in? Okay, we'll have you sworn in, please.
So just raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, and just state your name and address for the record, please.
Diane Ferris, 1214 South 4th Street.
All right, thank you.
I live there, and I just wanted to find out how it would affect the people who lives on South Fourth Street, because my backyard is right there. So I'm right on Simon Street. That's my backyard. So I just wanted to know how that parking lot would affect the people who are residing there, if it's a public place.
All right, and because of our process is to add additional evidence. How would Ms. Huffman, what was the best way to? Because we appreciate the question, but we're not the body that can actually answer that. So, but I wanted to. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes, that would be great.
Diane, you live right behind?
Yes.
Okay. I think as the project is designed, it would be less intrusive than if we provided an access off of Simon Street. The way it's designed, can I get back on here? Okay. Whoa, I'm going way too far. Oh, one more. Oh, there we go. Oh, come on, one more. One more? Nope. Okay. Diane? Okay, Diane, to answer your question, the way it's designed right now, it would be easy for us to possibly provide 2 or 3 feet of buffer for that alleyway, even though it's not required, so that you wouldn't even see into that parking lot. Right now, I don't know if you have the 3-dimensional graphics of the project in here. I submitted them as well. We have some aerial perspectives showing that we have fenced all of that in and tried to hide it, and we could plant it out. But I think with the cars coming in off of a busier side street, it makes more sense for that sort of traffic, and the traffic lights of cars and things coming in and out would be less obtrusive to everybody. But if they were coming in and out of the alleyway, traffic lights shining in your backyard, everybody coming in from the alley, pointing their cars at your house, is worse than that. So that's my answer. Okay.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else that has any additional information to provide related to this matter? All right. We will close the evidentiary hearing, and is there any rebuttal from the city or the applicant?
I believe anything further from city staff would need to be done as part of the evidentiary hearing,
Oh, I'm sorry.
unless
Yeah.
there are specific questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll keep it, well, I'll just temporarily open it up, back up. Well, rebuttals and that can be afterwards. So
I'll just add
Okay.
that with the access off of Simon Street as opposed to the driveway that is proposed, the applicant would gain 2 on-street parking spaces where that driveway is closed.
anything else from the applicant related to that?
The access to the parking lot, I believe, is 24 feet wide, is that driveway. So I don't know if that would constitute 2 off-street parking spaces. I think that would be 1. Am I correct?
Based on the observations of our engineer, Rob Gordon, he believes it would be at least 2 on-street parking spaces.
Well, the driveway is 24 feet wide. To get in there, that would be 2 12-foot parking spaces.
There is no ability to park between the existing driveway and where the alley is, correct? Because of the proximity to each of the drive openings. So you can't park between where the driveway onto your site is currently and where Simon Street is.
You can't park in front of Simon Street, correct? You can't park there.
Yeah, so you would be gaining more space than just the width of your driveway.
I'm confused. The driveway is 24 feet wide. As
If we could
proposed,
look
that
at
would
the
only fit 1
aerial
car.
All right, let's not talk over, let's just, so the city is stating there will be 2 spaces, correct? And there is some question in that, so I
Yes.
guess we can take that under advisement
Okay.
on both those. I appreciate it, thank you. Any other, while we're in, I'll officially close the evidentiary hearing at this time. Moving forward, we'll move into deliberations and discussion among the board.
I went to the property and looked at, Simon Street from Kidder Street is a significant drop right there from Kidder. The first part, and there are significant gouges in the sidewalk where vehicles have bottomed out, and it is a narrow alley, which I think 16 feet is all that's required there. And my question off of Simon Street is there adequate room for emergency vehicles to get in and out? I think the Kidder Street option is a much safer option than the Simon Street access in this case, because Simon Street is not a very well-developed alley, and it is a two-way alley.
Any other thoughts?
I think this is a reasonable request for this property type, especially the way the elevation drops and how undeveloped the alley is.
Yeah. Excuse me, it seems within the spirit, right? Kidder's not that busy of a street. We hear from a neighbor behind, if we direct everybody to the alley, then that's more impacting the neighbor that just spoke up. It's within the spirit because he's trying to build a nice project. It's an attractive project. He's done other nice things in that area. And based on the four findings of fact, the site is peculiar because of the drainage issue. That's my thoughts, Chairman.
He's also providing on-site parking, which does free up street parking for the other residents and businesses in the area.
In addition, I think they are doing a lot to try to remediate the water retention issue with using the on-site water ponds.
I agree.
Is there a motion at this time?
I'll make a motion to grant the variance based on the four findings of fact.
I would second that motion.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. Moving forward, we have a situation where we have one board member that has to recuse himself, and then we would have, I'm scheduled to leave. So to coordinate it so that we have a 5 board, I push them back to where I'm supposed to go so that we could do item number 2 with all of us, with someone recused, and then when I left, then, is that acceptable for the process? I don't want to make it so that someone would have to have a unanimous vote if I left and if someone
I'll
was
figure out a
recused.
solution, Catherine.
Right. I think that would probably be best if we can get through it in time before you need to leave.
Okay, and that's fine. I've told them that I'll get there as quick as I can. Do we need to do anything motion-wise too?
No.
Okay, all right, we are going to go to item that was actually number 2 in this schedule. We're going to go, before we do that though, we do have a request to recuse, and we do have to have a motion for that recusal.
You only have to have a motion if there's an objection to him recusing himself.
Okay, thank you. I thought we had it automatically. Appreciate it. That's why you thank you. Is there anyone that has any issue with that? All right, thank you. Welcome. All right, we're going to go to item number 2 on the agenda. This involves subject property 136 Skylar Sale Drive. This is a variance requiring to the swimming pool and accessory structure location located in the R12L residential district pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-19 and 18-214. Hi.
I'm back.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hubbs. The subject property at 136 Skystosale Drive contains an existing single-dwelling unit. The owner would like to construct an in-ground swimming pool and a detached accessory building, both of which are proposed to be sited in front of the principal structure. Land Development Code Section 18-199 states that accessory buildings and structures shall not be in front of the principal building. Additionally, City Code states that swimming pools shall not extend beyond the front facade of the principal structure. On February 2nd, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to those provisions to allow an accessory building and a swimming pool to be located in front of the principal building. This site is located within a special flood hazard area, a high velocity zone, VE 14, and it's surrounded by a conservation resource on the rear and to the side of the property. The proposed swimming pool and the associated decking would bring the total encroachment into the 75-foot resource setback to 23.48%. And any encroachment into the resource requires additional stormwater treatment. Should the board grant the variance, the proposed accessory structure and the associated swimming pool would need to be built to the higher floodplain standards, the V-zone standards. The applicant states that the location of the primary structure far to the rear of the lot doesn't leave adequate space to construct a swimming pool or the associated pool house such that it could comply with city code. The applicant further states that there will be a fence surrounding the pool with landscaping on the exterior of the fencing to conceal both the pool and the pool house. This matter was set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment on April 20th and subsequently continued to the May 18th meeting due to not having a full complement of the board. I'd like to submit the case summary and all attachments into the record, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have of city staff.
Anyone have any questions at this time? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll ask the applicant to come forward.
Good afternoon. Mike Everlin, 5460 Eford Road, Wilmington. This is fairly simple in my mind, is that we're looking to build a swimming pool for our client. And as you can see, the site is quite restrictive. And this is actually the second time I've been asked to work on this property in the past 15 years. We only have a very small window of an area where we can construct anything, and that is truly towards the front. Although the design is still quite fluid, you know, we're sort of capturing a square footage amount that we can capture right there towards the front. And we understand, we just received a letter from the HOA that we can't actually build an accessory structure. So at this point, we're not looking to, ask for anything from them. What we would like to do is just build a swimming pool at this point. And whatever else we can do in that front area. We are going for more of a English garden, sort of Hampton-style design, which really lends itself to that area. Grass right up to the coping and some nice pavement. But that truly is our only area to do this. And on such a high-dollar property, it is a shame that the owner cannot build a swimming pool. So that's where we came up with. We explored other areas on the property. One in particular, there was one other viable area, and that's sort of where that HVAC deck is on the, I guess that's on the north of the property. I don't know what side that is. It's on the left, on the bottom of the survey there. But that is just, there's not enough room there to do any sort of sizable with the setbacks and with the other restrictions we have. So we are asking simply for a variance to be able to put a swimming pool in the front of the home. Rather than tell this client or tell this owner that we can't build one at all.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone have any questions for the applicant at this time?
I have a question for staff. The variance request has changed. Does that,
In what way?
because there's no longer an accessory dwelling being requested?
No, that doesn't change the fact that they would require a variance to site the swimming pool in front of the principal structure.
So we're just modifying, we strike one of the items from there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does the city have anything in response to the applicants?
Not at this
President?
time. I believe that there may be some members of the public present to speak on this item, though.
Okay, all right, and that being the case, we're going to go into the evidentiary hearing, and this is for non-parties that are wanting to provide information that's competent, material, and substantive evidence related to this matter. I'd ask that you come forward. If you come forward, please state your name and your address. And
my name is Seth Buskirk,
and I'm an attorney representing several residents in the Shandy Point neighborhood. My personal address is 334 Pettigrew Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina, but my client's addresses, which are probably more important for standing purposes, are Alan Ruscher, 110 Crojack Lane, and that's right across a boat basin from the subject property. Jonas and Jennifer Pate, 118 Skies to Sail Drive, which is also right across the boat basin. Harry and Sally Archer, 119 Skies to Sail Drive, 3 doors down to the west of the subject property. Fred and Betty Adams, 139 Skies to Sail Drive, directly adjacent to the north. Robert and Kelly Pierce, 143 Skies to Sail Drive, 1 door down to the east. And Robert and Jenny Rippey, 100 Windlass Drive and 134 Skies to Sail Drive, adjacent to the west. And for the purposes of evaluating my client's standing, I've prepared an annotated map of the area so you can get acclimated to where everybody lives. And I would hand that to staff, I suppose.
Right, yes, yes, sir.
And while I'm doing that, we've assembled a packet of some other materials that are referenced, that we'll reference in our discussion.
All right, sir.
Okay. Our client's contention is that the applicant cannot meet any of the 4 criteria that are applicable to granting a variance under North Carolina Code and the city ordinance. And those criteria, of course, are found on North Carolina Code 160D 705-D, and with which the board is very familiar. The first element as to an undue hardship for the applicant. They really haven't demonstrated any hardship whatsoever. You know, the only hardship they've demonstrated is that they are unable to build a swimming pool. And this is a residential district. It has been for a long time. It's been used for residential purposes up until now, and it can continue to be used as a residential district. So what we really have is just an inconvenience and an inability to recreate in a swimming pool. That's the hardship. The second element as to the hardship and whether or not it is something that is peculiar to the property, it's not. The hardship doesn't result from anything that's peculiar to the lot. The lot is about 0.85 acres and has a 4,700-foot residence built at the rear end. The only real inconvenience, frankly, that led to the inability to build a pool is the decision where to place the house. So somebody made a decision that they wanted a very large front yard. They built a house to the rear of the lot where a pool could have gone. If they had a smaller front yard where they built the house, they may or may not have been able to have a pool, but they wouldn't have this problem. And that goes right to the third element about whether or not the hardship that is being complained about was created by the applicant or the owner. The statute reads in a disjunctive fashion, and it relates to whether the owner created the hardship or the applicant. We're not contending that the applicant created the claimed hardship because of the location of the house, but the lot owner did. The lot owner built the house and made that decision, and made it so the property could not have a code-compliant pool. That's all we have going on here. And if a variance under these circumstances were granted, think about the message that it would send. The message that it would send is that you can build your house sufficiently to the back of the yard and then get a variance to get around the pool ordinance. And the pool ordinance is in black and white terms. It says pools go in the front of in the rear of the house or the side, and they cannot extend past the front facade. So really what they're asking for under the guise of a variance is a rescission of a black and white land use ordinance about the use of the front of the property. And the City of Wilmington has made a decision that front yards are not meant to be used for swimming pools or accessory buildings. And a distinction is important there too about the pool versus the accessory building. If you go to the city code on pools, there's no provision in the city code for putting a pool in your front yard. Now, under accessory buildings, they leave open the potential for an exception. And that would be under section 18-249, sub B. If 4 criteria can be met, then, and in the area, accessory buildings are typical to front yards, and then the code allows for an accessory building in the front yard. So the applicant has not argued for application of that code section because there is not a consistent use of accessory buildings in front yards in this area. They are only saying that they have a hardship because of the house in its location. So there is no hardship, and any hardship that was created by a lot owner. And finally, the fourth item, as to whether or not the primary purpose of the code will be achieved by granting the variance, well, that does not occur. The City of Wilmington has made a decision to enact the code to allow for uniform developments of residential properties and whatnot. And this flies in the face to that. What it will say is that, you've got this exception, and now you have a pool in the front yard. Another very important aspect as far as whether or not substantial justice will be achieved is there is a very large live oak specimen tree directly adjacent right on the property line at one of our clients' properties. And two of the items that I provided to you with our packet are guidelines on construction and trees and the critical root zones and whatnot, and also some photographs of the trees. The tree location is depicted in the packet submitted with the application at page, I believe at page 18. And the page numbers are very hard to read, but yeah. At 18, you'll see at the north, well, no, I'm getting oriented here. Do you see where the live oak tree is on the map? And it's depicted right, it says it's a 30-inch tree. If you flip back to the last several pages of our packet, there's some color photos of the tree depicting how big it is. Our clients have consulted with an arborist, and the arborist has determined that, or stated that the pool construction and digging out a pool will have a significantly adverse impact on this live oak tree. And it's not even addressed in the application packet. But the fact of the matter is, front yards are consistently for live oak trees like this to thrive in our community. And allowing this variance would potentially do significant harm to that. Finally, as the applicant submitted, that there also is a set of private covenants that govern this neighborhood. So substantial justice will not be necessarily achieved by granting this variance. It will actually lead to more litigation. So with that, we respectfully request that the variance request be denied as not complying with any of the 4 elements required for it to be granted. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Anybody have any questions? No, we're good, thank you, sir.
Okay.
I'd ask for anyone else that has evidentiary information to present at this time?
Good afternoon. I'm Burroughs Smith, and I also live, I'm in 131 Scottsdale, across the street from this property, catty-cornered. I think the attorney laid out most of the arguments, but the only thing I would say, this is an older community. It's built in the 70s before the city annexed it. You know, our other swimming pools in the neighborhood, but they're all in the backyards, and the city ordinance is there for a reason. A lot of things with a pool, it's not all about sight, it's about noise that comes out of a pool, music, lighting. This applicant, I'm a developer, and one of the first things I do if I'm trying to ask for a variance or a zoning change is go meet with the community and hear what they have to say, kind of explain what I'm trying to do. Nobody in our community has ever met this homeowner. He has not made any kind of effort to outreach or explain what he's trying to do. If this is would be in one of my new developments, it would be a 40 or 50 page homeowner document with, we call them protective covenants that would protect the other people. But we're relying on the city ordinances to protect us in this case, because we don't have a 40 or 50 page document. So we're asking you to just do your job and the city's job and deny this variance and just uphold the ordinances as they're written. Any questions? I'm glad to say.
Thank you, sir.
And we are super glad he's dropping the outbuilding, because there was a lot of issues with that too. For example, it would have to be 9 feet off the ground because of the flood ordinances and stuff, but made it totally impractical. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that has anything to add to this? All right. While we're in the public hearing, the applicant has the ability to some rebuttal, and do you have anything you'd like to add?
So I'm not sure if it's clear, but this is you know, the attorney there referenced the lot and the house being built in the back. This is a brand-new homeowner. He has purchased this property. He didn't build this property. You know, in the tree location, I want everybody to know our goal is not to mess with the trees. Like, we would definitely keep that in mind and make sure that we were not impacting that tree. Those trees are more important to me than all of my clients. And we want to preserve that. And that is not the intent to put this pool there. I mean, we have one location, and we will modify that size, the orientation, in order to do this. And I understand the noise and all that, and I agree. I mean, pools can be noisy. There are other pools in the neighborhood. And I can't tell you that the client wouldn't enjoy his pool. I think that's the point of having a pool. But I do think that for the community, for this homeowner, he purchased this property. It's an amazing property. He just wants to make it even more amazing by putting a pool up there. And I you know, I think it's a great spot for it, but I understand. If there's any more questions, I'll answer.
Right. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Does the city have any additional information?
There's nothing further from the city. Thank you.
Sure. As long as it's something new and additional, yes, sir.
I think it is.
Okay.
My name's, I'm Harry Archer, 119 Scottsdale Soul. I'm catty corner. The main opposition I had to this was our covenants say you can't have any outbuildings that aren't connected to your house. And you also can't have any outbuildings, you know, right on the road, which this was going to be. Well, evidently they've removed that now, which is great. But when they say there's nowhere to put this pool, this lot is massive, okay? And it would make much more sense. I mean, he has this grand circular driveway right up against the house, and, you know, where I guess, you know, there's parking stuff, and, you know, if, it would require digging the whole yard up, his driveway, but if he's going to put a pool, he could put a small pool either right up beside the house or on the back side of the house. There is room. It wouldn't be an Olympic-sized pool, but there is room. They do have options. And this tree is right on the property line, and it's probably several hundred years old. And any pool that is, anybody that knows anything about a live oak, if this is the live oak tree, and let's say it's as big around as this room, the root system of any live oak tree reaches out the diameter of the width of the full tree. So there's absolutely no way to dig a pool in his front yard and not kill that tree. So, you know, I respectfully request you deny this motion, because I don't think it's well thought out. And on top of that, none of us have ever met the homeowner, and he didn't have we've been here since 12:30, and he didn't have the courtesy to even come to the meeting or respond to any of our objections. He's never come and talked to us a single time. We don't know him. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. Is it anything additional that's actually evidential? Yes. It's like, this is, our point is an opinion, or it's purely what you have positioned as far as information that's new?
I have not been sworn in.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Pamela Maureen. I live at 101 Windlass Drive, which is in the neighborhood of this applicant. As has been stated by the applicant's representative, this is a new homeowner. He purchased this home within the last 2 years approximately. If he really wanted a pool, my contention and the neighbor's contention is he should have researched the variances before he purchased the house, and then we wouldn't be here discussing this. So this is not a new situation. This house has been in existence for years, and it's been in the same location. So this should not even be an issue of contention. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other person that to present any new information or evidence that for this decision? Sure.
And this, just one, I think, important point to address the comments by the applicant's representative. Under North Carolina General Statute 160D-705, sub D, parens 3, that the hardship, I'll read the text of the statute, the hardship did not result from the actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. So this isn't a situation where when he tried to address, say, well, he bought this house like this and that's why he has the hardship. Well, if the statute meant that, then the statute would say applicant, not applicant or homeowner. So our contention is that this house's location was a decision made by the homeowner. This is not a peculiarity like the lot. Like you've heard about a lot of other requests today where topography creates the problem. That's peculiar to the lot, not where a lot owner built a structure that is 4,700 square feet. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anything else from the applicant or the city? I will go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing, and we'll move on to discussion and deliberations by the board.
I don't see any hardship. Like I said, it's a pool. The homeowner bought, knew what he was getting, so there's not any actions outside of his control. He knew what he was buying, and you know the code is the code. So there's nothing, you know, in my vision, is trying to fulfill the spirit towards the code to get the applicant a pool.
I would agree. I went and looked at the property, and the pool in the front yard doesn't really fit with the spirit of the land development code, and I don't think there is a hardship. I think it's a convenience. The lot is peculiar, and the house is against the water, which is where it should be, really, I guess. But I don't think there's any way to meet item 1 or item 4. It's not a hardship, and it does not fall within the spirit and purpose and intent of the ordinance.
Anybody else?
I agree with what's been said. I think the other point is, I think technically the live oak tree is 30 inches, which would be a specimen tree under the ordinance, right? So I think there's a potential challenge with damaging that tree with a pool in that location.
All right. Does anyone want to make a motion in regards to this variance?
I'd like to propose a motion that the variance request for 136 Sky Stasel Drive be denied as it does not meet the 4 findings of fact.
I'll second.
All right, it's been motioned and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone in favor? That variance is declined. And we will take a 2-minute change so that we can get corrected. So we'll take a recess for 2 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, 5 minutes, so there's a break, and then we'll be right back. Thank you.
We'll call the May 18 Board of Adjustment meeting back to order. The last item before us is number 9, 109 Gills Avenue, a variance to the tree preservation regarding one specimen tree in the R5 residential district pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code 18-316.
Good afternoon. We have 109 Giles Avenue and the adjacent property to the south. On April 5th, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to the tree preservation regarding one specimen tree in the R5 CD Residential Conditional District pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code Section 18-316. The subject property contains multiple dilapidated buildings, and the subject property also contains a 30-inch in diameter at breast height live oak tree, which is considered a specimen tree pursuant to LDC Section 18-316B. Land Development Code Section 18-316B2 states that removal of specimen trees shall be authorized by a waiver from the Board of Adjustment. The applicant has requested to remove one 30-inch diameter live oak tree from the property. The applicant states that the removal of the 30-inch live oak tree is essential to the site improvements that are necessary for the development of the two residential lots. The applicant states that the tree is located in the center of the project and avoiding compromised even if it would be, skipped a line here, that avoiding the tree in the design was not feasible. Additionally, the health of the tree would be compromised even if it could be prevented through the installation of an island. Lastly, the applicant states that the available area for the development is also limited by the need to traverse off-site drainage entering the site from the northwest corner at Giles Avenue, which requires a public drainage easement. Per Section 18-316F, the Land Development Code, removal of protected trees shall be mitigated on site by the same or comparable species. Mitigation for significant specimen trees shall occur at a rate of 200%. For every 1 caliper inch of tree removed measured at diameter at breast height, 2 caliper inches of mitigation trees shall be planted. Mitigation of a 30-inch live oak tree requires planting 60 caliper inches of comparable tree species on the site. This matter is set before hearing for the Board of Adjustment May 18, 2023. This case is subject to the 4 findings of fact. I submit all materials in this presentation into the record. Staff is available for questions, and the applicant is also present.
Any questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
The applicant could come forward. Thank you.
I'm Mark Reiser. 2029 Eastwood Road is my primary residence, and I'm the owner of the property. Cindy Wolf is representing me.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name's Cindy Wolf. I'm a registered landscape architect and have been assisting the owners of this property through the process. I'm at 107 Stokely Drive. I'd like to sort of set up the chain of events that got us here today. This was a project back in, 2008, 10, 12. There was a project that incorporated several of the lots here, including these two particular lots. There was a tree survey done at that time, and this was labeled as a 30-inch oak, just a 30-inch oak. Beyond that, that project never happened. In 2018, the owner of the property at that time then contacted me, and they bought the property. It was zoned multifamily at the time for this old project, which never occurred, and there were buildings on it. The interesting thing with the tree preservation now, including specimen trees, is that they residential properties, single family, in less than an acre, which each of these properties would have qualified as, are exempt from those tree preservation regulations. Neither here nor there as we're going forward, but just setting up a chain of things that had occurred. So when that survey was done in 2018, there were buildings. This is how the survey looked. Fast forward to 2022, when the project was proposed, again, there was not a survey at that time. Here it is labeled as a 30-inch live oak. That was after the fact, when the project had already been entitled. The project had already been detailed, designed, and permitted for construction, withstanding this particular action, because after an arborist went out, we found out that it was in fact a live oak. It is roughly in the center of the two tracks. If you look at the tree, it doesn't have the natural, the growth pattern of a live oak. So mea culpa, there was an issue all along that this project got through the process without ever being identified at that time as a live oak. It is a live oak. It is reasonably healthy, but it does sit in the center of the site. So with that, this is the layout of the site that was entitled back in February of 2022. It got caught up, obviously, in that the preservation of specimen trees having to be issued a variance for removal occurred December 1st, or was enacted December 1st of 2021, where the project was already in the process. I am showing the tree boundary of the 30-inch live oak with the critical root zone, and that's how it would affect this layout, this land, even without the buildings there. It's a pretty substantial critical root zone area. What this exhibit is also intended to show is that in exchange for the way the property is laid out, so if we were to try to move one of the buildings forward where the pond is and put the pond in the back, there would be an effect on the tree. There was certainly an effect on the tree from the lower parcel, which the tree is not even on. But the result of the layout that we have and the elimination of this one tree, which would be mitigated as required at 200%, translating into 60 new trees, provides the ability to have these other tree protection areas that are natural clusters of regulated and non-regulated, smaller than the 8-inch trees, that will be much more viable to be preserved, to be maintained, and to last out once the project is already constructed. With that, we feel like the findings in this particular case have been met, that the tree's central location to the site made trying to avoid it in the design extremely difficult. I will point out that these two quadruplexes that are proposed are well under the available density that could be managed on this site. Attached single family is now a permitted use in the R5. This is an R5 district, and at 1 unit per 3,500 square feet, there could be 3 or 4 more units on this site. So we're not trying to overdevelop the site to the detriment of that particular tree. The hardship because of the location and topography, it is in an odd place, obviously. If we were to develop each of the sites individually and not share the access between them, there'd be 2 driveways on Giles. There still would have to be parking for those buildings, and if we oriented the buildings up at the front, we'd have to get around to the back. So one way or the other, this central tree would be affected by whatever development was here. We have off-site water that traverses this site. That was on here along the northern part of the boundary. Will be required to dedicate a public drainage easement, but that made a difference in the buildable area that was available then for the site also. Were the actions taken by the property owner, we would contend no, that it would have affected anybody building anything here other than 2 single-family homes. The tree has been there, and we tried to design around everything that we could. And if requested, the variance was consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. Certainly, the subject tree to be removed would need to be mitigated. We're not arguing that in any way, shape, or form, but it would allow reasonable use of the 2 lots with the preservation of more regulated and non-regulated trees around the periphery. Mitigation at the 200% would be 30 new trees. It's a shame to lose 1 tree, but replacing it by 30 new ones is certainly, for the long term, an asset. Allowing latitude in the application and the preservation requirement on this particular parcel would not create any safety issue for the public. And we believe that the requested variance would provide substantial justice for the property owner and pursue reasonable use of his land based on the chain of events that occurred. A lot of work has been done because this unfortunately was not picked up back in February 2022, that it was in fact a live oak. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. I'll now open the evidentiary hearing. Seeing no one else in the audience, we will see if the city has anything to add before we close the evidentiary hearing.
Nothing more from the city.
Thank you. We will close the evidentiary hearing and move to board discussion.
I'll kick us off. So I think this is probably one of the more reasonable requests come through for removal of a live oak. The only thing that I would say if we are going to do it is being able to put some stipulations where the area that they had tree preservations outlined on the plot map, that those be maintained.
I agree. I mean, it's a shame to lose the tree, but it is going to be replaced with 30 new trees, and there's no request for a reduction in the mitigation of the taking of a specimen tree. So I think it is one of the more reasonable requests we've heard.
I would agree with both of those statements, and I'd like to make a motion to approve this variance based on the 4 findings of fact.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the variance as requested at 109 Gills Avenue. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Variance is granted. Thank you. Is there any further business before the Board of Adjustment today? Seeing none, I declare the meeting adjourned.